Good evening and welcome to the 10th meeting of fiscal year 2026 for the Milton Planning Board. At this time, I would like to now call the meeting to order and begin by introductions of the staff and members of the board.
Jim Davis, member.
Mag Field member.
And Cheryl, we have on Zoom.
Cheryl Tagaya, secretary.
And Meredith Hall serving as chair. This evening, Sean will not be able to attend the meeting, but we do have our staff with us. Liz Manning, planning director.
Avante Grady, assistant director.
Great. Welcome and welcome to everyone attending this evening. Our first items, we have our administrative items, which we don't have a set of minutes currently for approval. We approved quite a few last time, but I'm just waiting for those to be edited and reviewed by the members. Future meeting dates. This is our only meeting scheduled for December. Our next that will put us into our next regularly scheduled meeting dates, which will be January 8th and January 26th in 2026. So those will be the next regular scheduled meetings.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I had suggested the 3rd and 5th Thursday in January, if it was possible, because I've got a conflict on that second Thursday.
I'm sorry. Yes. So you would like to do these
3rd and 5th, which I believe
15th
And 29th?
and the 29th.
yes.
Yes, that's absolutely.
Is that okay with
Yeah.
folks?
Yes.
That might be great, actually, to work with some of our schedules and getting some things ready that we might be considering for Springtown meetings. So
I appreciate that.
great. So 1, 15, and 29. All right, excellent. And then staff update. Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So Avante and I have been very busy since our last meeting in November. So I guess it's been almost 4 weeks perhaps since our last meeting. So a couple of different things. I was able to share this report out with you. I know I said last time that I was going to try to get this report to you sooner than the day of the meeting, but I'm working on it. So the first item on that is the housing production plan. I was able to connect directly with the Karen Sonneborg, who was the consultant for the town the last time around. And my understanding is that she is available to do the work, which is wonderful. I need to collect 2 other prices on that, so I'm working on that. And hopefully by the time we meet again, I will have a more definitive answer on getting that housing production plan underway, because I know it's very timely and it's expired. The Traffic Commission has had a really busy agenda, a lot of activity around the Randolph Ave Road Diet and some of the, the sort of the feeder streets that are really being impacted as cut-throughs and what have you. There was a pilot valet parking plan approved for Abbey Park over in East Milton Square. So they're going to pilot that and sort of see how it goes and then bring some data back to the commission at a later date. I think it was maybe a month or 2. And so the agenda was so heavy on the 3rd that they needed to schedule a second meeting, and it might happen next week. So I should have more information about that when we meet again in January, but busy. So Avante and I met with the folks from the Shared Housing Support Office, which is a group that is organized through MAPC and is through the TRIC, sub-region. So had a one-on-one with them, got a better understanding of kind of like what they provide to the town. And now that we're sort of digging in more, deeply to some of these projects and sort of like what the status of these projects, we're getting a better grasp of like how to really get the best use for our funding and get the services that we really need there. And so, but a very productive meeting. So that was really helpful. Sign review met again and did approve new signs for 330 Granite Ave, which is a new nail salon there, close to Dependable Cleaners. Avante is going to be taking the lead on reviewing the work to date from Horsley Witten on the open space and recreation plan. The two of us are meeting next week, hopefully with Nick Milano, to review some of the information that he's collected for various town projects that might be helpful and overlap. So we're going to have a conversation there. And we also had a productive meeting with Park Commissioner Rob Lavash. And he brought us up to date on all his work with the CPC and his desire to get state grants for some of these field projects. So that was a good meeting as well. We also met with Tabor Keeley, who is on MAPC's executive committee, which I thought was very interesting and terrific for the town of Milton. I guess there's only 25 individuals on the executive committee for the whole sort of region-wide, and he's been very involved with them for a number of years. I was able to kind of dig in a little bit deeper in some of the questions around, the specific services that are available to the town, and I found a couple of local technical assistance projects that benefit Milton, language access planning and climate resilience playbook. So those are a couple of things that the members may want to hear more about at a later date. Had a call with the developers for 648 Canton Ave. They're looking potentially to get some federal home funding for that project. Don't really have a whole lot more on that one. I think they're trying to put some information together for that application. It's a pretty involved application for the federal funding.
Sorry, is that a
That's a
40B?
Yes.
Is that litigation or is that finished now?
My understanding is that that it hasn't fully been resolved. Yeah, but I don't really have a lot more information beyond that. I think it had something to do with the Conservation Commission.
Sounds like they're pushing
Was it-
forward.
Well, I mean, my guess is that they're hopeful, they're seeking whatever funding opportunities are that are out there based on what they're trying to build. And if it's 100% affordable, then, well, it doesn't even have to necessarily be 100% affordable to qualify for home funding, but home funding could be something that could underwrite the project potentially. But the appeals do need to get resolved.
Sure.
So just to update, so it was denied by the Conservation Commission. So
Interstate.
the Milton Conservation Commission, and Cheryl probably can't say anything about this right now because it is still in litigation, but it was sent over to DEP for review, who is the superseding body, and they did approve it. So last I heard, the select board was meeting in executive session to decide if they're going to take next steps in appealing the DEP's decision. On another note, the Historical Commission, and this just happened this week, I just found out, received a letter requesting comments from the Historical Commission on the 648, 652 project, asking for comments regarding the historic nature of the site, at which time they noted in their letter that the intent was to demolish 652, but to preserve the house at 648 Canton Ave and look at a redesign of the project. So there may be a redesign coming back to the town that would keep 648, preserve that house and keep it as a residential property. And I don't know what that would entail, reducing the footprint, but that was a change and a surprise to everyone at the Historical Commission that was, because that was not part of the original design. It was full demolition of both houses, which may be a good thing. But again, it is it's still in litigation in land court. So we do not know that has not been resolved. So
Great.
a building permit
that's helpful.
couldn't be provided at this time. So
Good.
so we'll stay
good to
updated
know.
on that. So sorry, just to
No, that's good.
Have that
I
information.
appreciate that. Again, still, we were, Avanti and I were driving back. We met with the Chamber of Commerce today at their luncheon, and I spoke to them just briefly. And we were trying to add in our head, the number of the number of units that are currently under construction. And then, how many of those are to be affordable? And then, just trying to like kind of wrap our head around, the monitoring and sort of like the regulatory agreements and and this is a project that doesn't have its building permit yet. So that's not part of the 400 or 500 units that we were trying to wrap our heads around this morning.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. Yeah,
Right.
it's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of, but we're getting there. So Boston to Blue Hills, there's a link in the staff report about that. I don't want to speak too much on that because I don't know that I really have done enough of kind of homework to understand exactly what the next steps are for that project. But my understanding is that they're focusing more on Blue Hills Parkway and sort of making improvements there for bicyclists and to make it easier for folks to get from Boston to the Blue Hills as this larger regional vision to get people into the Blue Hills, which is laudable. So we were sort of on the periphery of a regional MVP planning grant, which is being spearheaded by, I believe, Norwood, right? Was it Norwood? I think it was Norwood.
Yep.
We just found out today that Westwood apparently has declined. They don't have the staff bandwidth to do it. But this will primarily be coming out of the engineering department. So we'll just be sort of assisting kind of on the where we can. And so we had a quick visit at the Superfund site on the Neponset River. It was really interesting. I wasn't realizing that it was actually on the Boston side of this thing and sort of like at a different point in the river from what Milton folks are really sort of focusing on right now. But it was very helpful because we did get an opportunity to talk with the head of the Neponset River Watershed Association. The executive director. So we got to make a personal contact with him, which was good. And so yesterday we worked with Nick to get a district local technical assistance application in for the deadline, and it's a narrowed scope focusing on, this is in the economic development corridor, and it's a more narrowed scope from what was previously funded. So I could share more information with you guys if you want at the next meeting. And then if you wouldn't mind, if it's possible, could we reconfirm the FY26 committee assignments? Because I'm just having a hard time finding a clear vote for all of those assignments. And I just, if that, you wouldn't mind doing that, then I can have it in the minutes. And then I can, if anybody needs a letter or anybody needs any documentation, I can just refer to the minutes from this meeting of the vote.
Because I couldn't remember exactly when we took that vote, because you were requesting for Climate Action Committee that you needed that formally voted. And we ended up just voting the other committees, but just to review, I think what we had was, we had a motion to renew you as our representative to the Climate Action Committee, you to the
Capital.
Jim Davis to the Capital Committee, and myself to the Open Space and Recreation Committee.
And then Cheryl for CPC.
And Cheryl's for CPC.
And because this goes back to 7-1, Master Plan Implementation Committee as well.
Right, that was at that time.
Okay.
And also I'm on the Budget Overview Committee.
And the Budget Overview Committee, so.
Yep, I have Maggie for Climate and Budget Coordination, Cheryl for CPC and MPIC.
Which no longer
Meredith for
exists
Open
now,
Space.
so I don't think we need to re-vote that.
Fine, because it was sort of, it was going back to 7-1. I was being a little, picky-ony about it, but that's fine. That's fine.
We can,
So do you want a motion without MPIC?
Without MPIC? Yeah, that is.
I think because our vote would just be as of tonight, or unless you're asking to reconfirm the vote that we took previously.
Yeah, I just want,
If then we could include it, because if that was to confirm that those were the votes that were taken.
right, for all of these committee appointments effective 7/1/2025.
Yes.
7/1/25 to 6/30/26. Unless the committee is no longer in existence.
but that's, yes. So would anyone like to make a motion to approve those committee assignments?
Sure, I'll make a motion to reconfirm the fiscal 26 committee assignments, Cheryl Tagayas, CPC and MPIC, Maggie Oldfield Climate Committee and Budget Coordination, Jim Davis, Capital Planning, Meredith Hall, Open Space and Recreation. It's retroactive to 7/1/25.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, we'll do a roll call since we don't have everybody present. Cheryl?
Yes, Meredith, I had a couple questions for Liz when we're done with this vote, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay,
yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
Jim, and myself, yes. Great.
Thank
So
you, guys.
just while I see the note on your update that you advise that each member must be sworn in at the select board's office. So that was always my understanding. However, when I joined the budget overview committee, that question was asked, and Nick said, no, we don't have to do that because it is assumed that we are already sworn in as our roles on our committee.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have to then go get sworn in. So I was a little confused on that, so.
Well, I've got conflicting reports. I actually went and got sworn in by Sue Galvin because they sent me
Yeah,
an
that's what
email
I thought
asking
for
me
another.
to.
Yeah, so
sworn in.
I just, it would be nice to have confirmation, because I've attended both the Climate Action Committee and the Budget Coordination Committee since July 1st, and I haven't been sworn into either one of them.
Okay. Okay.
I'll find out. I was gonna stop in and talk to Sue about and get sworn in,
Yeah.
so I can ask her to confirm.
Yeah.
Because I think I did have something from Sue in writing saying that I did need to be sworn in.
That's what I got.
So we'll just, it can't hurt, you know.
Correct, yeah,
I
there
wonder-
should be a
I
process.
want, yeah, and it could, and I could speculate that it might be like committee specific. Potentially,
Feeling I got,
yeah,
I'm gonna try to find the.
yeah, like especially if there's like money involved or something, maybe, I have no idea, but
Yeah, but it can-
maybe, maybe.
We'll find out about.
Okay.
I had to do training and get sworn in from Gail Neville.
Ethics training?
Conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Great. And Cheryl, you had a question?
Yes, and I think whether it be answered tonight or at a future meeting, I'm interested in learning more about the home program, because I'm not really that familiar with it. And I don't think I'm not sure how active Milton's been with that. And then the other is the MVP. I'm not actually sure what that is. And so, and I know we have consultants waiting here. So again, you mentioned a few items on your list that you thought we might want to learn more about. And I would like to request that we put those on for a little longer agenda item in January, if we could, so that we don't have to keep our guests waiting. So thank you.
Good questions, yeah. Anything else? Okay,
That's enough. You've been
that's
busy.
it. That is,
You got your assistant
that's
just in
impressive.
time.
That's impressive, yes.
Wow.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a whole month.
Okay.
Great.
That's for a raise.
So now,
You didn't hear that from me.
at this time, we can move to our public comment. If there's anyone in the public who has any comments or questions for the board, please feel free to raise your hand.
Oh, let me just double check, make sure there's no one out there. Yeah, 2 attendees, but no one's got their hands raised.
Okay, all right. So then let's move to the MBTA Community Zoning Economic Feasibility Analysis from MAPC. An update on that?
Yeah, so I just want to introduce Adam Pletz. I want to make sure I get your title right, Adam. Director of Housing Services at Metropolitan Area Planning Council, is that correct?
I'm not a director officially, I'm a manager.
Manager.
So I'm the manager of housing and neighborhood development at MAPC, but close enough.
Welcome, yeah.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to introduce your colleague,
Absolutely.
I'm having a bunch of tech problems today, so I think I can let you share your screen, but I'm not 100%. I can always share the slides myself if that's easier.
Okay, well, we'll let Avanti give it a shot, and if there's any issues whatsoever, we'll switch back over to you. Does that sound fair?
Sounds good.
Cool. I'd like to introduce Avanti Crovey. She is a senior planner with MAPC's land use department. She's a generalist planner in that group. She's been working on 3A economic feasibility analysis, which she's going to provide a summary of our research and results. I will hand it over to Avanti.
Great. Let's see how share screen goes. All right. Are you guys seeing that?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, great. Cool. Well, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Avanti. Like Adam said, I'm a senior regional land use planner at MAPC. And I'm working on the economic feasibility analysis for Milton. And we're here today to discuss some of the zoning options for Milton's MBTA districts. Before I do that, just so we're all on the same page, just wanted to go through a brief overview of what inclusionary zoning is as a tool. It's a policy tool that requires affordable units to be included in market rate developments, essentially setting aside a specific percentage of units to be affordable. This policy tool is set by municipalities, but subsidies for the affordable units are not required. Instead, market rate units help cross-subsidize or cover the cost of including the required affordable units. So setting a well-balanced policy is really critical because if a policy requirement asks for too much affordability, market rate revenue may not cover the cost of affordable units, making projects economically infeasible. But if the project doesn't require enough, then the town isn't gaining all of the affordability benefits it could be. So the goal of this financial analysis is to essentially find that sweet spot between maximizing community benefit while maintaining development feasibility. So this is a conceptual diagram that illustrates how project income and ultimately the range of feasibility decreases when an inclusionary policy either asks for a higher percentage of unit set-asides and or goes deeper into affordability requirements. And this is just to kind of explain what I mean when I'm saying affordable units. HUD uses a percentage of area median income or AMI to determine eligibility for deed restricted affordable housing units. So you can see in the chart here, the HUD limits for the geographic region that includes Milton. 60% AMI and 80% AMI are the most typical affordability benchmarks for inclusionary policies, and that's what we most commonly see across Massachusetts. Also just wanted to give a little bit more context on the economic feasibility assessment or the EFA itself and how it fits with Milton's MBTA overlay districts. So HLC stipulates that local inclusionary zoning policies may conflict with Section 3A by right zoning if the affordability requirements make a project economically infeasible. So they require that no more than 10% of units be affordable to households earning 80% AMI. A lot of municipalities will go beyond that 10% figure, or they'll try to reach for a deeper affordability level, like 60% AMI. So in those cases, and it's a lot of municipalities that'll do that, HLC will then require an EFA as part of the town's compliance application. So that's what this whole analysis is kind of about. To measure feasibility, HLC generally wants to see potential projects that would hit at least a 15% internal rate of return. That's an IRR figure, and a 5.5% return on cost. So those are the development feasibility benchmarks we've been using. Sometimes small projects will be just under 15% or 5.5%. And that's when the feasibility becomes a little bit questionable because it's harder to get financing for those small projects. At the same time, depending on what that number is, if it's just under 15%, we acknowledge that small projects are usually constructed by small developers, and they typically require a lower return than regional or national investors. So we have in the past been able to justify IRRs that are in that 14% range only for a small project, if that is what the town chooses, and we have done that before. So for Milton, and as part of the EFA process, we test various building scenarios with a pro forma analysis to understand whether such scenarios are hitting that 15% IRR and 5.5% return on cost. These are all hypothetical, but the assumptions we're making in this analysis are based off of real data from industry standards. We've spoken with multiple developers across the region and have confirmed data and confirmed trends. And we've also submitted several of these EFAs where HLC is paying close attention to our inputs and approves of our assumptions. So we're pretty comfortable with the assumptions we're making for these scenarios. In terms of project size, with each of these different scenarios, we like to test the smallest project size that would be subject to affordability requirements. So in Milton, for the current MBTA overlay districts, that would be an 8-unit project. So that's why you see that as our first scenario in this chart. And you can see that the largest development scenario we're testing is 75 units. We are assuming that if the policy is viable for a 75-unit project, it would also be viable for larger projects because of cost effectiveness and economies of scale. So Milton's current bylaw, for its MBTA districts, it's requiring 15% of new housing units to be affordable for households earning up to 80% of the AMI. And that's probably the most common policy we see across the region. If Milton wants to increase the percentage of housing units from 15% or go for a deeper level of affordability than 80%, that will require a zoning amendment. And that's what's bringing us here today to discuss those options look like and which policy option we want to pursue. So there are technically 4 options we're looking at, although I will say the last 2 are pretty much the same, just with some small key differences. But overall, all these options could work for our analysis and for a potential inclusionary policy. But I do just want to note that for option 2 and for option 3A, as you can see, the feasibility for small scale projects is a little bit lower than the 15% IRR that we're trying to hit. Like I mentioned earlier, small projects are usually constructed by small developers, and we have been able to justify IRRs that are in the 14 to 15% range before. So if we do choose that option, we can justify that to HLC, but only for small projects can we justify those kinds of returns. I'm going to walk through each of these options so that we can discuss them more in detail at the end of this. Here we go. Yeah. So option 1 is what is currently written in Milton's bylaw for MBTA districts. It says 15% of units will be affordable at 80% AMI. Like I mentioned earlier, this is very common across Massachusetts. It's pretty well understood by developers. At 80% AMI, we can maximize the number of affordable units. In this example, I illustrated on the right here with one of our scenarios, a 50-unit development. With that calculation, we would get 8 affordable units at 80% AMI. And because this is already part of your bylaw, this isn't going to require a zoning amendment. The only con I'll note with this policy option is that 80% AMI does not support lower income levels where need is greater. So that's the only con I would note about that. For option two would require a small percentage of new units to be affordable. We would require it at 8% instead of 15%, but you would get a deeper level of affordability. Instead of 80% AMI, you're going to get 60% AMI. The pros are obviously that 60% of area median income, that's serving lower income levels. And as I just said, that's where affordability needs tend to be the greatest. It's also a pretty simple policy to implement and understand. The cons I just want to note here is that it will generate fewer affordable units. That's kind of the trade-off for deeper affordability. And if we're generating fewer affordable units overall, that will slow down the pace of affordable unit construction. And that is just particularly important to note because the state subsidized housing inventory requires 10% of the housing stock to be affordable in a town or a city. And with only 8% being required for new developments, it will be hard to keep up with the 10% requirement in the long run. I do just also want to note that this was one of the policy options that we saw from above, where small scale projects were returning an IRR that was more in the 14 to 15% range, which is just a little bit lower than ideal for developer profitability. And then the only other thing I wanted to just keep in mind is that this would require a zoning amendment since it's not what's currently written in the bylaw. The next two options are almost the same policy, just with a few key differences. This option differentiates between small and large projects, taking into account that it's harder to get affordable units out of smaller projects. So in this option, small projects, which we're defining as 20 units or less, would provide 10% of new units as affordable. Half of those would be affordable at 80% AMI and the other half at 60% AMI. For large projects, those would provide 12% of new units as affordable, and same split where half of them would be affordable at 80% AMI and the other half would be affordable at 60% AMI. So if you're still following along with the illustration here on the right, in our 50 unit development example, that would count as a large project, which means 12% or 6 out of the 50 units would be affordable. Out of those 6 units, 3 of them would be affordable at the 60% AMI level, and the other 3 would be affordable at the 80% AMI level. The pros to this policy is that it does balance the number of affordable units and depth of affordability. The cons are that it is a little complex to follow, which means that it will require a little bit more municipal capacity to administer. It's also going to require a zoning amendment. And then I will just also note that this was one of the policy options that similarly returned an IR between the 14 to 15% range for the small scale projects. Option 3B is very similar to option 3A, but in this case, all projects, regardless of size, provide 12% of their units as affordable. For small projects, those are the projects that are 20 units or smaller, their 12% would just all go to 80% AMI, since 60% might be hard for those smaller projects to hit. For the large projects that are above 20 units, those would still need to provide half of their 12% at 80% AMI and the other half at 60% AMI. So it comes out to the same calculation that we saw for option 3A. 3 of the units would be at 80% AMI and the other 3 units would be at 60% AMI. The pros and cons are pretty much the same. Like I said, this policy is, again, trying to just balance the number of affordable units with the depth of affordability. Unlike option 3A, in our pro forma analysis, the rate of return for small projects in this option actually are more feasible. So that is one pro. But the cons are that it is still kind of a complex policy to administer. So just to compare all the options across that like 50 unit hypothetical example I was showing, this just kind of illustrates the trade-offs between depth of affordability and number of units. We can think of option 1 as maximizing the number of units. Option 2 is prioritizing depth of affordability, even if there's fewer units. And options 3A and 3B are kind of trying to find the middle ground between having a good number of units, but also acknowledging or trying to achieve some of that deep affordability. And then just before diving into discussion, just wanted to point out some other policy details that you guys might want to consider as you think about this. For example, the threshold at which this policy kicks in. Right now, for Milton's MBTA districts, your affordability requirements are kicking in for developments with 8 units or more. So if you want to change that number, that might be something to discuss. You could also consider different requirements for home ownership versus rental units. You could think about alternative to on-site affordable unit construction. So for example, if you want to allow a developer to pay an in lieu fee as an option instead of building the affordable unit, that could be part of a policy. And then you also just want to generally think about the mechanism for administering and just think about the municipal capacity for if you especially choose one of those more complex policies. All right. So that's pretty much it on my end. I think the big thing that Adam and I really want to walk away from today is which policy option we should consider as we are writing up the economic feasibility analysis, and just overall what policy option you guys feel aligns most for the town of Milton. Thank you. And I can stop sharing my screen.
That's great. That was really interesting. How you broke down that analysis. I'll just start with questions of the members of the board.
Would HLC ever consider reducing the 10% requirement of towns if we went to a 60% AMI? Or are we, I mean, I know it's state law at 10%, but if they really want to work with communities and help create more affordable units, the true affordable, as you mentioned, perhaps they should look at reducing the 10% requirement. Has that been discussed?
And this is for the subsidized housing inventory, chapter
Yes.
40B, or is this for?
Yes, yeah.
I could take this one.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
I think that's beyond both of our pay grades. I do think that I have heard discussions about that in my travels around the region over the last 6-7 months that I've been in this job. I think that there is an emerging recognition that the SHI program, the 40B program, how it works and how it exists is problematic in certain respects to the development of affordable housing, particularly at, as you pointed out, kind of the lower level or the lower percentage AMI. I think the challenge with that, and I don't want to turn this into like a policy discussion, but I think the challenges with kind of getting down into those lower AMIs is even if the state would kind of change the structure of how SHI worked, you're going to bump into the feasibility stuff that we're just talking about now. You get into these like lower percentage AMIs that it's really hard for them to pencil out at scale. And by scale, I mean, it's hard. You're going to be hard pressed to find places that would be able to pull this off in large numbers. I think that's the challenge.
Yeah,
I think it also Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so that's what I know it's a policy question and I know it has been spoken about and I'm an advocate for changing our state law to let communities have a little bit more local control over it. So I know it's probably outside of this discussion. But another question I have is just recently in Cambridge, I believe a developer filed a suit against the Cambridge policy and their subsidized, their inclusionary zoning. And so how is that going to affect, are we jumping the gun until that court case is heard? Because I believe their argument is that they're going against a developer's fundamental property rights.
That's interesting. I'm assuming that suit is being brought in respect to the affordable housing overlay in Cambridge, which effectively, covers every square inch of the city. So I think that's probably where that's kind of legally being grounded. That's not what we're proposing here. And I feel like we're on very, very strong ground here in respect to IZ and how it works legally in the state.
Because I just would hate to put all this time and work and if we could have a potential of a change coming.
Yeah, I mean that is the first I've heard of it, but I guess it is slightly concerning, but I wouldn't pause this for that.
Jim, did you and Cheryl?
I just want to weigh in saying that great presentation. It was quick and to the point, and I got it. Thank you. And I'm an advocate for just sticking with option one. I really feel that getting any units above 10% is paramount in getting Milton a safe harbor. I mean, if we were at safe harbor and we were well into safe harbor, maybe I would look at other options. But for now, I got to confess, I'm a little closed-minded, and I really want the 15% to get us to safe harbor to just put the stop to these 40Bs, because they're huge developments and they're the developments that impact our town in the most dire way. So I'm an option one advocate.
Cheryl?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So I have a couple questions. First is that this work will, be submitted to EOHLC in support of the zoning that was passed in June, right? Because it was kind of contingent, the 15% affordable requirement was contingent on this analysis, correct?
That's right.
So what you will present will basically say that, yes, it is viable in Milton to keep this at 15% at the 80% AMI.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Our analysis shows that it is feasible and viable.
Okay. So, and your methodology is the methodology that the state set up, right? Each EOHLC set up to do this work. Is that right? Or
Yeah.
does it
Well,
they, approve of
MAPC,
the methodology?
Yeah, I can just comment a little bit and say MAPC developed the methodology for all the different assumptions we're making around the different scenarios. But we've done a lot, several of these analyses since then. And we've had, and so now those assumptions are the state is very familiar with our assumptions. They're very well versed in our assumptions, and they've approved of all the analyses we've sent them. And they approve of that methodology. So we made the methodology, but it is a state vetted methodology.
Okay. And that methodology in your report, it'll be evident to us how you arrived at your conclusions.
Yes, the report that the actual EFA and report that you'll all see will have a lot more detail with a lot of appendices, specific source citations, where we are drawing from and how we're calculating everything.
Great. And then have you seen other communities go with that sort of your option 3A or 3B? Because I agree with others that having a requirement which yields less than 10% is not going to be supported, I don't think, because Milton needs to gain ground, make up ground or on that 10% to meet that 10%. So we can't we'll lose ground if we have something less than that. But I am somewhat interested in that third option and whether others are pursuing that or already have it on the books.
Vonti, I can take that one. We did a similar presentation, similar to this last week in Acton, and it was a much longer conversation. We provided more options. One of them was a tiered option, and that was the one. It was also an interesting meeting because it was like joint housing trust planning board, select board. So it was kind of a mess. In a good way. I mean, it was a good conversation. And yeah, I think they came to the conclusion that an option with a tiered approach was the one they wanted us to kind of look at a little more. So it is done. I actually don't know off the top of my head if Acton is above 10%. I feel like the bigger question is who's doing it that's under 10%. I don't believe Acton is. I believe they're over. But the short answer to your question is yes, some communities are looking at kind of those tiered options.
Yeah, I was going to mention something similar to what Acton is doing apparently. I do think we should get feedback from the Affordable Housing Trust and the Select Board as well on whether they would like to see any further analysis of any of these options. But I do think that it makes sense for us to at least confirm that what we have in our zoning is supportable, right? And that if there's something to change, that there's some public process in thinking about that. I don't think our board should close out that discussion right out of the blocks. I think we should invite other feedback on whether we should consider that change. I don't see it as an immediate need, but I also am curious. I'm an architect by day, and I have seen projects where the numbers are just more challenging to make work in general. And I have seen where the city of Boston, which has fairly high requirements on inclusionary zoning, has been giving some relief to developers, kind of stepping it back a little bit from some 21% and 17% that they have in some places to something less, just to get the projects, to help move the projects along. So I guess I would be interested in seeing some of your backup data at some point, just to kind of see if you're seeing projects actually getting built in your data, or is it just ones that are getting approved? I don't know if that's clear to you, what I'm kind of seeking there in that information.
So you want to know if the kind of the model we're using is based on projects that were built or projects that were permitted?
Yes, like in today's economic climate, I'm seeing that projects are harder and harder to pencil out financially.
Yes.
And there's less and less actually getting built. So Boston has made some presentations about this in the last couple of months that I've seen that were pretty interesting. There's a lot of units approved, but not nearly as many getting built. And part of it is the financial challenge that we're in with the economics, whether it's construction costs, labor shortages, interest rates, land costs, what have you. So while you've said that, yes, this is feasible and these are at 10 units, these are feasible, I just am curious about the data that supports that.
Yeah, Avanti, I'll let you have the final word on this, but I will say that the models that we use are constantly being updated. And that's kind of like one of the things that we make sure we do is interview developers, people in this game now, what they're seeing and what we hear from them can adjust some of our assumptions. I mean, I think the challenge with this is that these are hypothetical scenarios. They're based on assumptions. We can tweak those as much as we can to kind of the reality of on the ground. But at the end of the day, they're still assumptions. So we try to make them as informed currently as possible, I think would be the answer there. Avanti, do you have any thoughts on, kind of that perspective based on the fact that you kind of ran these numbers initially?
Yeah. I do think, I mean, you guys will be we'll share all this information with Liz.
Yes.
It'll be reflected in the analysis, but like, you'll be able to see like the construction costs we used and like how much we're assuming like wood frame versus like steel cost and like things like that. So you'll be able to see those assumptions. And I agree with Adam, what you were saying, that we, I think, have done a pretty good job of keeping those numbers up to date and consistent with like inflation of construction materials and things like that. And we also have just like anecdotally talked with a lot of developers about these numbers. Your other data point on what's getting permitted versus what's actually getting built, that's really interesting. That is the data point that I'm not sure if we have, or if that's like something we're tracking. It could definitely be something I could ask our data services or research team overall at MAPC. Is like, is that something we have ever looked into? Is that something we're trying to observe just generally, like with any of the cities or towns across the region? But that's the only thing I can't confidently say we would be able to demonstrate or show that gap between what's actually getting built versus what's in the pipeline and getting approved.
But we also have to remember that this whole MBTA 3A has been sold to communities that it's just zoning. It's not production. It's not a production requirement. It's just a zoning requirement. So now you're looking at, it is actually a production. Like, do we care actually if units get produced or not? Like from the zoning perspective.
I think that's not a question for this group. I think that's a question for the state, but I hear what you're saying. So in terms of Milton, I feel, time is of the essence for us. We passed the zoning through town meeting. We're at risk of having projects come before us until this actually, we can support the 15%. So from a timeline perspective, how long has it taken you to do your report for EOHLC? And then what has their response time typically been for approval?
I have to get back to you on that, unless you know, Avanti, but I think you can answer the question, I guess, like how long will it take us? If we had an answer tonight,
right,
where are we at in terms of turning around a memo that could go to the state?
Yeah, I can answer that part. I feel like if we decided tonight, and I'm accounting for like holiday break and things like that, I would say like in early to mid-January, I could have a draft memo ready for Liz and the rest of you guys to like look over a review, a first draft. And I would say like, typically with like other municipalities I have worked at, usually between like 2 to 3 months. That's the overall process. We're like kind of halfway through the process. We're kind of in this point where we're just trying to decide which policy option to include in our EFA. So if we walk away deciding like, yes, let's do this option, then I can immediately just write up the memo, get the draft going over, and it should wrap up pretty quickly.
Yeah,
So
and I don't have a great sense of like turnaround time from EOHLC, but we do have a relationship with the people who do that work, and we can be annoying about reviews like anyone can. So I guess I would commit to that, but I would have to get back to some of the people who've actually gone through this whole process. I'm not one of them. And ask on a sense of timing. I also think like you guys are at a tail end of this process, which, 9 months ago, that review period would probably be longer because there were more people kind of submitting. And I just know I know the body of work that we have in this space has narrowed significantly, and we have the majority of communities that this thing would be triggered on.
That's great.
MAPC, that is.
That's great. And I agree with, Cheryl's point that I think these things, once we have this approved, that it shouldn't just end there, that we should be able to still, continue to look at how we can be creative while still getting ahead in our units, which is really critical to Milton to get ahead and meet our 10% threshold. But I would be definitely open to having further conversations, even though once this, and hopefully it will be approved, and it sounds like you all have done a great job and very successful with getting your memos and your analysis approved. Just one other question that I have just to think about. Have you seen any communities which have either requested to do above 15%? I think Newton possibly, and maybe Brookline, but some communities were considering writing in 17% into their zoning. I don't know if you've seen that done, or if you have seen communities that have done 15%, if they have requested on top of that for less than 8 units, that they would acquire a payment of some sort as a portion of their development profit margins. Would that be something that we could if we get 15% approved, could we later request that we would add on, a request to go into the Affordable Housing Trust from developments less, because we could potentially see quite a few under 8 units. Is that something that we could possibly build our Affordable Housing Trust funds that way?
You have that? Yeah, go ahead.
I can answer some of it, and then Adam, I'll turn it to you if you have any thoughts. But I'll just say for going higher than 15%, I think I have seen that, and I will say I think it was to some of the points that I think Cheryl was bringing up. I think it was a lot easier a few years ago to do that, but because of inflation and the cost of materials and everything, at least from what I am hearing anecdotally from developers, not just me, but like our MAPC team, from what we're hearing, is that there is just a lot of uncertainty right now with costs, and that is making developers kind of less likely to go into communities that have higher than 15%. Or going up to 17 or 18 or even 20%. So that's just anecdotal. That's not coming from any verified source. That's just coming from the conversations our MAPC team has had with developers. I have seen examples of in lieu fees for affordable units. And I am trying to remember, I don't want to misquote the city or town, because I've worked with Hull and I've worked with Melrose, and I believe one of them had an in lieu payment option instead of building. So I have seen those options before. What was the other part of your question?
It was not really in lieu of an affordable unit, but for those who were for developments under 8 units, which wouldn't have any affordable, if we could ever ask for there to be some sort of a payment into the Affordable Housing Trust if they weren't required to do anything. if we could do that on top of our 15 for units above 8, developments above 8.
Yeah, Adam, do you know if any? Yeah. I'm not sure if I know if any off the top of my head.
I don't know if I would consider that. But I think the answer, kind of my broad brush answer to this entire kind of conversation, this piece of it, is you could do whatever you want. You can absolutely do whatever you want here. I think what is important is, and that's to say, like, I think it gets back to Cheryl's comments, some of the other planning board members' comments about, like, the fact that things change, right? Like, stuff changes, costs change, the market changes. Even if we decided, even if you guys decided tonight to do 15% at 80, you should be re-examining IZ policies at minimum every 5 years, because things can get stale and they can stop working, and they often require like sale trimming, and sometimes they require wholesale kind of changes. But I say that to say, like, we could find examples of probably every scenario under the sun on IZ, related to in lieu, related to whether it's 17% at 80 or maybe it's 17% at 85. I mean, generally people stay in the 80, 60, kind of 100 range in terms of, like, it's not great to, like, be tweaking those percentages on the AMI side, but people more often tweak on the required unit number percentage. Like, sometimes they'll do 25%, not 25%, but like 15, 17, 12%. I think we saw some of that in our scenarios. But I guess I'm just saying that to say that, like, all of this stuff is tweakable. I think what's important, and it gets to kind of the point of what our presentation is about, if you're going to tweak, you got to look at feasibility. And is it or is it not feasible? I think if you can answer whether it's feasible, if something is feasible, then you can do it. And there's not a lot that's necessarily stopping you.
So do you think it is feasible for us to request higher than 15%?
I think that in the current market, in the current climate, that would be tough. That would be tough to do. But I haven't run the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Alexis, I can re-examine the numbers, but one of our housing analysis, I think, Liz, you were working with before I got on the project, Alexis, when she ran the numbers, and she had told me that I would run it again myself, but she had told me that going above 15% would put you guys a little bit in that questionable feasibility range. I don't have, like, exact IRRs or return on cost to quote on that, but she did tell me that a little bit higher than 15%, it started to get into questionable feasibility.
That's what I remember.
And then it gets
also.
close to what a developer doing a 40B would be required to do. So that becomes more attractive. I think we don't want to risk that until we get our 10% safe harbor. And Liz, any comments, any thoughts from you that you would like to add?
The third and fourth options are, clearly would be difficult to administer based on current staffing capacity. We have that shared housing support office, which is a terrific resource, but we kind of have all we can handle just to wrap our hands around the current 40Bs that we're dealing with, trying to, deal with all the various components of fair marketing and regulatory agreements and annual monitoring and et cetera. So realistically, I think the simpler the better. I haven't dug into, like, the numbers behind the analysis, so I really can't speak to that. But I think my sense is the 15% at 80 is probably the most realistic approach right now, but it's definitely, like Adam was saying, this is the type of stuff that you don't do it once and then sort of walk away for several years. Like, it's something that should be
Right.
should be looked at, and numbers from, that conversation about, what were the numbers for something that's been built versus something that's been permitted? Well, the numbers for what was built are probably so out of, I don't even know that you could even use them today, in terms of like how quickly things have escalated and how quickly the environment has changed in construction and whatnot. So that's my thinking on it. I don't know how.
Well, it sounds like we're all on the same table for, at least for right now. So I would love to be able to give MAPC a direction that they could draft a memo. We have a meeting on January 15th. Would that be a reasonable time for you to be able to put something together to have for us to discuss if we were to vote on option 1 tonight?
I would be able to have a memo ready for you. I would not be able to, I will actually be out of office on January 15th. I won't be able to be there, but I could have something ready by January 15th for you guys to vote on.
Okay. And if you have it earlier and you could send it to us prior to our meeting, so we have time just to, everyone has time to read and think about it. But it sounds like your expertise in this area would, it should be good.
Meredith?
Yes, Cheryl.
I agree with pursuing the memo for the 15% at 80% AMI. But I also would like Liz to let the town administrator and the select board and the Affordable Housing Trust know about this analysis. And if they want to watch the tape of the meeting or review this PowerPoint, and if they have any comments that they would want to submit to us. I just feel like as important as this is, and as much interest as this has had over the last few years, it's a very short time frame for, and it's over the holidays, for people to like find out about it after the fact. It just, I don't think would sit as well. So just in the spirit of transparency and openness, I would make that suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's great. So, and given that town meeting supported the zoning,
Everybody knows about the 15%. This is
that's what we voted on. But I think that's great to share, especially the presentation and the different options for the future, for sure. So with that, I would entertain a motion to support the drafting of a memo for application to EOHLC, supporting our 15% affordable at 80%. Is there a motion?
Sure, I'll make that motion. I'll make a motion to draft a memo to direct to draft MAPC to draft a memo supporting the 15% option and submit it to EOHLC.
Yes.
A
Is there a
second.
second?
So to submit it to EOHLC or to draft?
To draft,
in
yeah.
January?
We're too far out.
A memo to send it to EOHLC, but it's just a draft at this point to be approved by us.
Yeah, so I guess I would like the motion to be just to prepare the draft and to submit that for discussion in January. So that gives an opportunity for the select board or the town administrator to also review before a vote to actually submit to
Yes.
HLC.
That's
Okay,
was the intent, yes.
okay.
Okay,
Then
is there
I'll
a second to
support-
that? Is that a motion?
Then, yeah. Well, if, Jim, are you accepting that kind of
As-
refinement of your motion?
As a friendly, I'd love to. They
Okay,
call it
then
a
I'll
friendly,
second.
yeah.
Okay,
amendment.
it's friendly, it is meant to be friendly, and then I will second it, yes, thanks.
Okay, roll call, all in favor, Cheryl,
Yes,
Maggie,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
and myself, yes. All right, thank you very much. That's
Great, thank you.
presentation.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well done, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Too wordy with the amendment. Note to self.
Super. Knocking things off the
Exactly.
list.
So our next item is to welcome and introduce our new representative from KP Law, Attorney Carolyn Murray is here. Welcome. Yes, please join us. And this is for a discussion of the Attorney General's zoning amendment review of our articles. And then we can maybe keep you for a moment just to discuss some of the conversation around the rules and regs that we were
Certainly.
reviewing too, so we can cover both of those.
So thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. So it's nice to finally meet some of you folks in person. I know that KP has not been on board for very long, and for those of you that I've never had contact with before, a little bit of my background. I've been a municipal lawyer for going on 24 years, I guess. Before even going to law school, I actually worked in your neighboring town of Braintree in their legal department for about 8 years. And I've either been at KP Law or I've been at the town of Braintree in their legal department. First as their paralegal and then as their first town solicitor when they changed their form of government. So I bring with me not just a land use knowledge, but sort of a general broad overview of municipal law. So I've recognized that sometimes you go to meetings like this and, for example, do you need to be sworn in for some of these subcommittees? And I chuckle at questions like that because it really does depend on the committee and whether it's ex officio or whether it's something that is standalone. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you, it suffice to say. So I see on the agenda that you had discussion about the zoning amendments generally, but I was also asked to look at the site, go through more specifically to talk about the site plan review bylaw and the regulations as drafted just generally, and then as they apply to the ADUs. I don't know if you want to focus more on site plan review first, or if you've got any particular, shall we?
Either way, what do you prefer, Liz?
I think
Maybe ADU first. ADU
Okay.
might be just a little.
I provided the board has had the Attorney General's letters, for a while now, on the three articles that we're talking about, the site plan review, the ADU, and then now with the MBTA communities. I think, and Cheryl, I know Cheryl was interested in this topic as well. I think the primary, my understanding is a primary driver is sort of like the limits of the board's authority as it, with respect to the protected uses, and also with, what can and can't be done properly with site plan review and that power. There's probably other things too, though, that were in those letters from the Attorney General. I don't know if it's worthwhile to look at those individually, or the one on the MBTA communities is kind of the most recent. That's November 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my sort of.
I wasn't surprised by any of the comments, actually. It was sort of, a lot of what their comments were some things that were part of our discussion. Some of the language and terms and definitions that they struck were things that we put in knowing that there was a chance, like boarding and lodging. That came up even at town meeting. Trailers, mobile trailer, for ADUs. Some of the things that were addressed were not surprising. I guess one of the questions that I had is when they partially approve something and they say that we don't approve those specific
that
words,
language.
you strike that language. That does not require, I just want to clarify that we are not required to go back to town meeting.
Absolutely not, no.
For that. That is,
No.
those are struck, and that is what gets the clerk will then take our articles less that
Exactly.
language.
Exactly.
And that's what
Yes,
Or
and
moving
I
forward.
can say, the town clerk, I've had a couple of conversations with her as well as the decisions have come out and she asked that exact question at one point. But that is exactly right.
So does she clean this stuff up or do you clean it up and give it to her and she files it?
She has already cleaned it up.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know if she has posted yet, so
It was
we're in the
posted in the
process.
Milton Times
Okay.
today that came out. All of our articles, it's a book at the end of the.
Yeah, she's got a lot
Yes.
on
The
her plate.
Milton Times.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's in there, yes.
And I will just say, you know, like on the ADUs, you know, we've kind of been, we've been seeing an awful lot of these, you know, on behalf of all of our clients. And I have yet to see an ADU decision from the AG come down in less than 10 pages because they're sort of following this particular format, you know, and you could probably skip the first 5 pages because they're the same for every single community. A lot of communities are getting partial approvals similar to what you got here, for precisely the same reason. You know, like some communities, you know, were drafting these early on in the process, you know, and then I think it was January 23rd when the final draft regulations were issued. Well, you know, there were some towns that had already, their warrants had already closed. They already had to have their internal deadlines met. And there were a few things that, you know, we weren't exactly sure how it was going to be interpreted. And there were some communities, like you were just alluding to, Madam Chair, that nothing ventured, nothing gained. You know, let's put it in there because we're not really sure how they'll ultimately come down on it. But if the AG doesn't like it, they'll strike it. We still have a bylaw in place. So we've been surprised in different areas as to some things that have passed and some things that haven't. But, you know, overall, you know, looking at what they did strike here under your ADU, like I said, I wasn't surprised either.
Yeah. And it was very minimal.
Right. And so that, you know, has been, as you said, it's now been posted by the town clerk, so that should be.
Spent a lot of time discussing the size and we're still backed up
Right,
by
the
the building code,
350
so
feet, less than 350 feet.
the building code still covers us and then
Right.
it still has to be, whatever structure still has to be permanently attached to a foundation, which makes me feel good. So you
Right,
can't roll a tiny house trailer onto your front lawn,
Right.
call it an ADU. So it wasn't bad, in my humble opinion.
No, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And it was interesting because when we were in the middle of drafting our ADU article, the final definitions hadn't even come out yet. So we felt like we were right on top of it as quickly as we could be to get something in, knowing that ADUs were gonna be coming, applications would be coming. So given the time was of the essence to get this completed.
And like I said, I think that was the case with a lot of communities that, you know, you either scrambled at the last moment to put in substitute motions or floor amendments at town meeting. And you all know your town meetings better than I do. Everyone, you know, there are some town meetings you do not present a floor amendment. That is the quickest way to put the nail in the coffin of a zoning amendment. Do not do that. Others, you know, what's a 10-page substitute motion handed out as people check in at town
It's not
meeting?
us.
You know, and in fairness, a 10-page amendment shouldn't be handed out right at town meeting. So, you know, there's a little bit of a know your town and see how it will work. And like I said, there were some communities who felt this is important to us. We're going to put this in. Let the Attorney General tell us we can't have it. And like I said, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So, but overall, to get a partial approval, that's pretty much what everybody is getting these days. So, and I know we've already had a few conversations or emails from your building inspector about certain scenarios and how we should apply it. So
Good.
it's going to be an active issue going forward.
Yep, we had a owner come in today and looking to do a detached ADU and we'll need site plan review, so it's coming.
So Liz, Meredith, I, as Liz said, did suggest that town council advise us a bit. The decisions or I guess the decisions from the AG, they, in a few places, they say town should discuss this issue in more detail with town council. And so those were the things I was looking for some feedback on. And also, if there's anything that we need to do as an amendment to any of the zoning that we passed in response to the letters. And I think some of it really has to do with Dover Amendment, which MBTA community zoning and ADUs are now protected as well. And so they had some cautions. They said they approved, but they had some cautions. So, before we get applications coming in under these, I just think it would be helpful to understand if you have any suggestions for us on that, on those comments or those sections.
Certainly. So that's also not unusual for the Attorney General anytime they want to just raise something or make sure that the town applies it consistently with a statute or whatever. They always refer you back to, please speak to town council. That's their gentle way of saying, okay, this is technically consistent with state law and we don't have a basis for denying it, but be careful how you apply it. So I know there was a question about the Dover Amendment and what is or is not a protected use. So a true purist on the Dover Amendment would say religious and nonprofit educational uses are the true Dover amendments. And yes, over the years, we get these little additional add-ons like childcare facilities. I've heard some people use Dover and solar in the same sentence. It's like, they're not exactly. There's a difference between, what can we absolutely not prohibit versus what can we reasonably regulate. So, MBTA zoning comes in under an entirely separate statute under 3A as opposed to 40A Section 3. You got to flip a whole page over in the books. MBTA zoning is not a Dover use. It is a requirement, yes, for MBTA communities to adopt zoning, but it is not a Dover use. ADUs with this, and I want to be clear, they use the term now protected use ADU. So it has to be an ADU that complies with the state definition of an accessory dwelling unit. They refer to it now as a protected use ADU. It is, I'm going to call it Dover-like in that, yes, it is, we cannot prohibit its use. Anywhere where, a single family residential use is allowed, we cannot prohibit it, just like we can't prohibit a church, a synagogue, a temple, and we can't prohibit a nonprofit school. But what we can regulate with the Dover uses, there's 8 categories that we can regulate. So we can't prohibit them. We can't necessarily require a special permit or unreasonably regulate them, but we can impose reasonable conditions as applied to bulk, height, lot area, open space, building coverage, parking. And I know, there's 2 more that I should know off the top of my head, but there are 8 specific things in the statute that they say you can regulate. So I know, for example, with respect to the site
Setbacks, it was setbacks.
setbacks too, yes, thank you. So those are the only areas that we're allowed to regulate, and that generates an awful lot of questions from communities in terms of, well, what is a reasonable regulation? And more importantly, who decides what a reasonable regulation is? Some communities, they will give some latitude to, say, your building commissioner or your zoning enforcement officer. Typically, that's done by bylaw, saying, okay, you can assess certain restrictions. In other communities, the protected use will either go to the zoning board or go to the planning board as might be applicable, usually the zoning board. They might go kicking and screaming because they don't think they need to go to the zoning board of appeals, or they might go there voluntarily, or they might go there under what they call a reservation of rights, where they want to be, good neighbors. where they're willing to say, okay, you are allowed to decide how many parking spaces is reasonable for my use or how high my building can be and that sort of thing. But you can't require a variance for them or can't hold them to the variance standard, for example. Most of the time, unless you've got a specific bylaw spelling out how those Dover uses are going to be administered, most of the time the building inspector is going to refer them to the zoning board of appeals and say, you know, the closest use that resembles this is X. And do your very best as you can to apply the zoning bylaw or the spirit and intent of the bylaw without prohibiting the use. So I know, for example, that was something that in particular, the Attorney General brought up in the site plan review comment letter. And again, with that caution of just be careful how you apply it, because a few things. One is you've got a very, very in-depth site plan review bylaw now. You know, God bless you all if you're gonna, you know, whether it's building design, site design, landscaping, lighting, in addition to the normal site circulation, parking, et cetera, you've got a very robust bylaw of all of the things that you look at. When you then compare them to the 8 categories that the statute allows you to apply to a Dover amendment, we are not going to be talking about the caliper of trees or how many trees are going to be cleared from a Dover site. We're not going to be looking at a photometric plan or dark sky compliant lighting. You know, you're only going to be able to look at those like physical characteristics, you know, bulk height, open space setbacks, et cetera. So I know there's been a lot of discussion, mostly by email, about, well, what does that mean and what should we do? You know, you've got your bylaw, you've got your draft regulations that you're going to discuss tonight. One question is, do you have a different set of regulations for Dover protected uses that might trigger the site plan review bylaw? I suppose. Sure.
Sorry, can I just chime in there? We don't, but I do think we should. And I think one of the problems that we had was just how far we could go. I guess it's with those 8 items that you mentioned. But I do think should that be a separate section of the zoning bylaw, or should that fall within the site plan review that we pass?
I think it could be either, to be honest. You could have a subset to your site plan review bylaw as it applies just to Dover amendment uses. But right now, when you look at the applicability section for site plan review, multifamily, mixed use or commercial greater than 800 square feet, or parking, loading, access driveways related to those uses. I pause and ask, how often is, you know, a religious or a nonprofit educational use going to have a multifamily residence? I don't know if we're really considering a dorm to be multifamily residence. I'll leave that to the side for the moment. You very rarely see mixed use or commercial uses with those uses. They might have a gift shop, for example. I don't know whether you're going to get a gift shop greater than 800 square feet to really be, or maybe you might have a cafe or something in there, but is that really the type of mixed use that is going to be combined with a Dover protected use to trigger site plan review? I suppose, and again, then when you look at parking, loading, and access driveways that are associated with that multifamily or mixed use or commercial, how often is all of that going to come together and apply to a Dover protected use? I think it's going to be rather rare, to be honest with you. But independent of your applicability section, there are some towns that have a separate site plan review for Dover protected uses bylaw. And it is very much scaled down to just those particular items that Chapter 40A, Section 3 allows you to regulate. So that is something that, you know, could be considered for the future if you think you need to.
Are we automatically, as under the Mass State definition of Dover Amendment, which clarifies what a planning board or what a town can oversee, are we protected under having that we could regulate those items without having, right? Currently, it's like if we had a Dover Amendment project, which we have had actually recently, we've had 2 preschools, we've had a few items, daycare, that we've had to look at through the lens of a Dover Amendment. So are we currently protected under what the state statute says? And then also the question is, because maybe it is something that we do look at as having just something that we add a separate section to. A lot of it, there's some gray areas where it comes to safety, where I see the crossover with lighting. Like, you can't necessarily regulate lighting, but you also have to make sure that it's safe and that the lighting is not offensive to neighbors, because I believe that is within the jurisdiction of a planning board to look at the safety factors and protection of both the neighbors and whoever would be parking, whether it's on a parking lot, that there's enough lighting, but yet it's not too much lighting, for example.
Right. So by asking, are we protected under what the Dover Amendment currently provides? I want to make sure I understand the question.
Yeah.
Meaning, you currently have to comply with 40A Section 3, right, absent any kind of a bylaw.
Right.
Okay. So a Dover use comes in, we're going to just do our best to follow 40A Section 3.
Right.
And there might be some pieces of our zoning bylaw that we might apply. Like, for example, when a childcare facility comes in, sometimes as guidance, a building inspector or a zoning board might look to other requirements in the bylaw that might apply to, say, a private school, and see whether or not the parking requirements and maybe some other aspects of it. You're always going to have a minimum lot size, a frontage, setback that apply within your zoning district too. So if you're asking, do we have to adopt a bylaw, or are we okay just operating under the confines of 48.3 as is, you don't need a bylaw.
Okay.
And in fact, you've already proven that when a Dover Amendment use comes in, all right, we just sort of figure this out as we go, and we abide by as much as we can of the bylaw, and a certain amount we might just have to overlook or say, well, we can't go there, we can't regulate that particular aspect. I hear what you're saying about safety and lighting, and I think it might also go hand in hand with what is the use, right?
That's where I think it's hard to.
Traffic's a big one too.
And I think that's where I think where we have come, our experience with these Dover amendments, and we've had really great projects, which we just had one that was recently approved, that they said this was the most efficient approval process. They came prepared. It was an out-of-state developer. And we were able to, we knew our boundaries, like what we could, but there were things that we asked them for that we knew we couldn't mandate, but we asked them and they were open, and they were like, of course, this is we like this project better because of these suggestions.
Right.
So sometimes we do like for them to see what's in our site plan. These are the things, these are what we're trying to achieve in a project, but we know we can't require them.
Right.
So maybe having something, which Liz was maybe suggesting, or maybe you have a section or something that we include the Dover amendments, but, and maybe you know of a good article.
I would rather see the Dover amendments separate, not buried in our site plan review document.
And you might be able to give us a great example of a town who's done it too.
Just like as a Dover amendment applicant, I don't want to have to go through all this. I just want to be like, okay, Town of Milton, What's your requirement?
Because I might have skipped right over the site plan review
Yes.
chapters thinking, oh, that doesn't apply. And didn't hang in there for that final paragraph at the end. Right, you could do that. And you, Madam Chair, you're just asking one community that does it by site plan review and has it in their bylaws, the town of Wayland. They have a pretty, I think it's, only like two short paragraphs basically that they subject a use to site plan review. In my experience, you have really two different kinds of Dover protected uses or applicants. There are those that want to work with the community. And as you say, sounds like the one that you just had, said, oh, this was a pleasurable process. It was efficient, it was great. Other communities, I'll get the letter from the lawyer first before we even know that the Dover use is coming in, telling us, just to make it perfectly clear, this is a Dover protected use. You can't subject us to this. I had one lawyer send us a letter about a daycare facility, childcare facility, saying you cannot subject us to site plan review. It's like, I don't know where you went to law school or where you've last read anything on this, but you most certainly can subject those uses to site plan review. So, and then there's sort of like that applicant in the middle that really is willing to play along to a certain point, but they also want you to know that at any point they can pull out of the process and say, you just can't go there. So I think having something in the bylaw that just says, here are the expectations, I think that goes a long way for both the applicant, because they know who they're supposed to deal with, and they're not trying to lobby a building inspector to say, we don't need to bother the zoning board of appeals by this. You can just go ahead and you can decide how tall our building should be. If you lay it out there, you set the expectations for the applicants. You also clearly identify, okay, if it is going to be site plan review, is it going to the planning board who administers that site plan review, or is it going to be someone else? And we're going to be very clear about the 8 items that we can address. Safety and lighting, I don't know anyone who's going to argue about safety or argue that a parking lot shouldn't be well lit, or that, say, exit stairwells or emergency stairwells, should not be lit. Some of those things are going to be handled just by the building code itself. But I think if you've got a Dover use site plan review bylaw, and in the course of talking about, the 8 things that we're allowed to talk about, if safety and lighting come up, I don't think anyone's going to balk at that. I think they will feel fine. But if we start saying, well, can you please identify the mature trees on the property that will be preserved? And can you tell me what your landscaping plan is going to be and make sure they're all native species? I think you're going to start to lose the goodwill and momentum with that particular applicant. So I'd be happy to send you a copy of Wayland's as a starting point. Not that it's perfect and every town has their own way of doing things, but at least why reinvent the wheel if you can see what someone else has already done.
Absolutely.
So I can
That would be
certainly send
great if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Will you also tag on the 8 criteria for?
I will, yes.
Yeah, and I think those are in,
I know they're in my email earlier today. I don't know
Or there, I can,
that.
don't bother, I'll find it.
So
No, that's fine.
I was hoping to have that printed out for everybody. It's in the folder for Carolyn's review of the site plan review.
yeah, we can circulate
Regs.
that just,
Yeah, it's uploaded in the folder, and I do have one hard copy of it that I can share if anybody wants to look at it. But reviewing the rules and regulations kind of like, do you have it?
I have it in my
Oh,
email,
you've
but I
got
can
it.
pass it
Okay,
to
all right.
Jim.
Do you
Jim, if
just-
you want
That's
to.
okay, I'll find it, don't worry
It's in
about
our
it,
big
thank you.
binder, Jim.
It's in,
It's in that gigantic, oh, really? All right, I'll be looking at that.
the rules and regs?
There is.
No, just the 8 criteria for, I think it's the Dover amendment that we're.
Yes,
Oh,
yep.
yes.
Yep.
Yep.
I was gonna say, if you find my email, it's bullet point number 6.
And here's a hard copy if you want. You're more than happy to use that.
Yeah, I have
So, yes, well, a lot of this stuff kind of came up as, oh, sorry, Cheryl. A lot of these items came up as in the review of the rules and regulations because it's alluding to how we're gonna handle the process.
Right.
So, and it's trying to, you know, not outthink, but, you know, trying to anticipate as much as we can, you know, these sort of like these scenarios. And I don't want to forget and you had some comments as well, Carolyn, about the, like this idea with like a constructive grant and, you know, and making sure that we're really careful and have a very clear process.
Right.
If there's an incomplete application. And that, you know, so in this memorandum, which I received today, and is in the board's folder on the website, there's a lot there. I don't know if it's worth, would it make sense to try to kind of go through it sort of piece by piece, or I don't know what folks feel like they want to do.
Well, I think your comments were really good, and it might be some things that I would love to give the board time to digest and think about and read. I know Cheryl, you would probably, you know, some of the things, and everyone else would be interested in having a chance to absorb and listen to. We can do it, it would be nice to maybe do an overview tonight. And then, but I think the ADU, the rules and regs, that in your comments on those would be much simpler.
Right.
And it would be great because we just got an ADU application that came in, and it would be nice to, if our board can approve and vote on the ADU rules and regs this evening, and then defer the site plan review vote to our January meeting, and just give members time to think of questions that they might have. So why don't we start with the ADU rules and regs first? Does that make sense? And your comments on that and
And that's actually, I had no proposed changes to that one. I thought that you covered everything that you needed to cover in that one.
Did anybody
I have a question on the ADU, because some folks have asked me, at what point in the process does an applicant, do they have their completed construction documents with site plan that they filed with the building official before it gets triggered to a site plan approval? Because sometimes, again, in my day job world, before something gets its zoning approval, an applicant may not complete that level of detail of drawing because they may end up having to redo it. So I don't know that it's that clear in our submission requirements, that what level of detail is required?
I think, so Avanti and I were talking about this today after the gentleman left the office, the architect. So I think, my opinion is that the building commissioner is going to need a survey plan in order to make a determination that the ADU can be done. So, and beyond that, you know, and we, again, we kind of had this conversation. I said, I want to make sure we're very clear with applicants that, you know, before you spend a lot of money, you just all want to know that this is something you can actually build. So maybe we get some kind of like a zoning, you know, memo from the building commissioner kind of at the outset. I mean, that's going to have to happen anyway, but you're required to do elevations and floor plans for the primary residence, even if it's a detached ADU. That's how I read it. That could get expensive. I don't know whether or not I'm reading that properly.
because that's gonna have to, that would determine the size of the accessory dwelling unit. That it would be
I guess, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at, honestly, I'd have to go back and even like get myself up to speed on like,
Determine the sign, that's
Because
exactly how you.
that's why you would need that primary, even if it's detached, because the size of the ADU is determined by primary residence total, right?
Half the
It's either half the
footage,
square foot or
not to
900
exceed
square
900,
feet.
right?
Not to exceed 900 square feet.
oh, very good.
So
So, and that's even with the detached.
For both attached to detached, yep.
So, okay, so walk me through it. So if it's a 1,500 square foot primary residence, what's your limit?
750,
Okay, okay.
unless your
All right,
bylaw
okay.
allows.
Right, but but needing like floor plans for the primary residence, right? That's different than knowing what the square footage is.
Well, you'd at least need the perimeter
the
outline.
perimeter.
Right, so I guess what I'm saying is, there's stuff that they're probably someone's gonna have to do regardless. And then there could be other things that could cost some money. And you don't want to get people to get too far down the road on that. The one thing that I could think of is that sort of interior stuff on the primary residence. I mean, you're probably gonna have to do that anyway if you're doing an addition, if it's gonna be part of that principal structure. But if you're not touching the principal structure, I think you also have to do renderings for the principal structure so that you can get a sense of what the accessory is gonna look like on the site with the principal. So I don't know how to put something in the rules, regulations that's gonna, I don't know, I'd be open to a suggestion as to how to facilitate that.
Don't we have an opt-out clause already? You would determine if this all needs to be done? And could you look at a project and say, hey, if you just measured that with a tape measure to determine the 1,800 square feet or more, to cap it at 900, would be your discretion as the planner? Then they may have to get an as-built survey and then position the detached ADU on the parcel, but that might be a couple of grand as opposed to architect's plans. You could nip
I
it
mean,
in
if
the
you
bud.
go on the town's website and you bring up the
Census.
card on the house, on the website, it has the dimensions of the footprint of the house.
Right.
So there's really anybody could go and do
That's a good
that.
point.
Although I think
Controls cost right there.
I think it needs to be a little bit more specific than that, because that footprint, you don't know if it includes a porch, an outside porch area. Sometimes they just do a big
I
outline
think
of
it's
that site.
probably gonna be more pre-existing non-conforming, side setbacks that don't conform today. It's gonna be parking areas, it's gonna be, I think those are the types of things that you're gonna have to know, like all that stuff's gonna have to be located.
That would be covered by a survey, right? Which isn't, my experience with surveys is they're like $1,200, $1,500 to do an as-built and then to place an addition or a garage or whatever you're building, in this case, a detached ADU. I mean, are we thinking that, $1,500 or $2,000 is too much for someone to spend before they get potentially shot down?
And it's also, and I have to go back and look, is it usable floor space? That it's, because I think that would exclude stairwells, closets, so that's partly why I'm thinking that you need to have something more detailed. Isn't it usable?
It's gross floor area, and they defined it specifically in the statute, and so there are, they're very clear about what they include or exclude. They exclude crawl spaces, garage parking areas, attics, enclosed porches, or similar spaces.
So I was anticipating the building commissioner confirming that stuff,
I agree.
right?
So I think that was your question, Cheryl, right? At what point do those designs need to be done?
My point was like, at what point does one file for the planning board site plan approval on it? So the building department, it does a different level of review than the planning board, right?
Right.
What's required for the building department is more detailed than what's required for the planning board.
Yes.
So is a checklist, so I guess I'm wondering, is it clear to someone who wants to build an ADU what the process is for those two different reviews? Does it make sense? It's not just a survey, Jim. If someone's doing an ADU, let's say it's, they're going to do an addition or a standalone detached, they're going to need structural drawings, architectural drawings, and the survey, et cetera. Do they get all of those drawings done? Because I think what we heard from our building commissioner is that someone did do that, or maybe it was from the Board of Appeal that I heard this. Someone did do that, and then they found that no, that it wouldn't be approved on zoning grounds, and they had done all these complete construction documents, which will be far more than $1,200 or $1,500.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
So,
We shouldn't hold those.
Yeah,
Yeah, we shouldn't hold them to that until they get some kind of a.
right.
verbal
That's what I
that
just want to
it
be
would work.
clear. I
Yeah.
want it to be clear, like you have a site plan, and it almost seems like in that initial stage, you do have on the town's GIS system from the assessing department is the size of the enclosed space. So you could use that as an initial review to determine the size of the unit, which would be maxed out at 900 anyway. At least an initial review that, yes, that this particular property with this particular home could meet the ADU requirements. And then from there, they could go spend additional funds to develop a more complete set. But it's a set for the planning board and then a more detailed set for the building department.
So wouldn't the process be just like any renovation at your house, that the applicant, say I wanted to do an ADU, I would first go to the building department. The building inspector would say, fill out this form, let me do a review, and then he would write a letter, to the applicant, either a denial letter or a letter outlining the next steps. I feel like it would start at the building department.
That should be the gateway, the first gate.
Yes, and
The
then
first
the
sentence.
building inspector would say, okay, this is the list of things you need. So is that what Michael White is looking for, a list of, like a process?
Yeah, he reviewed these rules and regulations, and his only comment was that the first stop should be with the GIS manager to create a second address. Or create a unique address for the second unit. So he was comfortable with it. Honestly, I was trying to back as much of this into Permitize, Cheryl, as I could. Because the more that gets into Permitize at the outset, I don't have to duplicate it. Like I can get the dimensions and I can get, sort of that information right out of Permitize. And then, but again, I mean, we're looking for architectural plans showing the existing floor layouts of the principal dwelling and the proposed floor layout of the accessory dwelling unit. So this is the conversation I had today with an architect. Like, you're right. You don't want people to get too far down the road with, drawing up these plans if they don't have a really clear answer, whether or not they can do it. So I like that idea of having something, maybe we could get something in Permitize from the building commissioner that is some type of a confirmation that the again, I'm not really sure how they're gonna make an affirmative decision without survey plans.
I mean, I just think that that's just common knowledge. You need to have a survey. Like as an applicant, I just think that's a given. If you're gonna embark on a project, you know there's an outlay of money up front, and it's not guaranteed that it's going to pass or not. And that's, I don't know, I just think that's the nature.
But in this case, if you meet the requirements in the state law, then it is a guarantee you're going to get it approved, because you can't deny it if you meet those requirements, right? So
Well, you have to meet height.
how onerous you can make it, right?
You have to show that you're gonna meet those.
It can't be any more, what? It can't be any more than what, a single family? What you would require for a single family, right?
Or an accessory structure in the same zoning district, whichever is more permissive. So yeah, you've got to analyze. I mean, to your point, you're gonna have to look at, you're gonna need to know what is the existing square footage of the house on the lot. Yes, you could probably get that through the assessors, but then where are they proposing to put this? So we'll know, that'll tell us what's the maximum size of this ADU. But then where are they proposing to put it? And then the building commissioner is usually the one who looks at it to say, okay, do you meet the setback requirements? How high is it going to be? Make sure it meets that. Are you providing a, separate parking, whatever the various things are that he looks at. I don't know how you do that without at least having some sort of, a survey plan with at least a square on it saying, this is where the ADU is going to go, with showing the setback and dimensions, like from lot lines, et cetera. But then the site plan review component that comes to the planning board is different, because you folks are looking at design standards. You're looking at architectural features and compatibility in terms of color palettes and finishes and roof pitch, that sort of thing. I suppose you could just have a concept plan that's created as opposed to a full-blown, set of construction detail plans.
Right.
But what the planning board's gonna be looking at is different from what the building inspector is looking at. But at the same time, if you're looking at things like roof pitch, and if you're looking at an ADU that's gonna be in a detached accessory structure, and if that detached accessory structure is only 5 feet off of the abutting property line, you might not want to approve, the gable with the window facing into the neighbor's backyard. You might, suggest orienting it more towards the interior towards the principal dwelling. So I can appreciate that you're trying to keep the cost down for, the folks who are gonna be coming in to build these ADUs. But I don't know how they get through site plan approval without doing some of this work and paying some professionals to show you what they're planning on doing.
So is the concern not having an applicant have to spend so much money upfront until we're sure that it's gonna go to site plan review? Because once it gets to site plan review, we can't deny it. It's the way I understand site plan
Right.
review.
Right.
So is the
So I-
question, at what point do we actually say, okay, now you gotta get construction drawings? For the past couple of, meetings, a survey was great and an as-built was great, and architect's rendering was fine, but now we have to go to the next level and spend a couple grand or whatever. I don't know what a full set of drawings costs.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to, well, maybe another conversation. Cheryl, what do you think? As far as like the level of drawing, right?
To me, it's,
We wouldn't expect them
the-
to be at 100% like construction drawings, until they're ready to.
yeah, so let's
I
just
don't
use the
know.
example of the dormer. So if you had a full set of drawings, you might have framing plans that show the dormer on the east side, and then the planning board asks you to move it to the west side. So now you're not just amending your building elevations, but you're amending your framing plans. So I do think it's worth trying to get the site plan approval done before the full set of documents that the building department needs. So I think if we can figure out how to incorporate that into the process with the building commissioner and with the site plan review rules and regs, I think that would be more homeowner friendly. And, you know, the cost of these is high already. And I think just having a clear process for folks would be really beneficial. And I think what we're trying to do is sort of sort out what that clear process is. So Liz, maybe you can go back and speak to Michael again, based on our conversations here. I'm happy to join a conversation if that would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think,
And we can update these because I think this is weird, this is all so new, that if we were to vote on approving this tonight, we could vote to update it with additional changes or amendments that we would want to make. But I think not giving them any I think giving them as much information as we can at this early stage would be helpful. And I think we'll be learning along the way.
So one of the things, Meredith, about voting tonight is I checked the folder when Liz sent this out last week, or whenever you first sent it out, Liz, and I reviewed everything that was in it. And then I didn't get a chance to review the new things that were added to it, including the memos and the final, these regs. So I would like a little time to be able to review all of these things that were added to the folder.
Okay.
Including this, that this is something I do think is worth thinking through well. And we have a vote at our first January meeting, that's what I would suggest.
Okay.
I would try to keep the process similar to what our existing process is, with the building inspector and site plan approval. Can we try to keep it as
he's new and I'm new.
right, yeah.
So we're still trying, you know what I mean? So some of it is still just trying to figure out that relationship. If I had done one with him already, it probably would have been easier, a little bit easier to put this stuff together. But no, I think that's all. I mean, as long as you guys are comfortable with me handing out like draft rules and regulations, which I did today. Because it spells it out pretty clearly. I mean, this gentleman already had done, they thought they were hoping to maybe subdivide, and so they had already done some drawings and had spent some money already on the property. Yeah, I want to be able, I know these are going to be coming in, so I just wanted to, I'm just trying to get somewhat ahead of it if we can.
And Cheryl, I just want to go back to what you were originally stating, is that you had spoken to somebody who had actually gone directly to the ZBA first, not the building department?
No, I don't think so. I think this was, I'm sorry, I'm not sure, Meredith. This is just something that came up. That I recall that someone told me that they had gone that very far, thinking that it was something that was as of right approvable, and then they had done all of the work and found out it wasn't.
I believe an ADU was built. We currently have an ADU that was built, and they didn't pull any permits or whatever, they didn't meet any setbacks. And so my understanding is the building inspector is trying to figure out what to do with it when they don't meet any, it's fully built.
That's different.
You get a permit.
The one that, that's,
Permit,
Yeah.
that's a different.
yeah, that's different
That's a
than the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and what I just wanted to remind people of is that you can go to the ZBA if you want to exceed the 900 square feet. If you don't want it to be under a still go and seek an approval for an ADU that's not under our protected use. Correct, that's
So right
my
now-
understanding.
So right now, if since this is a use which is allowed, and somebody wanted to build one, they would have to file for a building permit, and then it would be up to the building commissioner to decide whether the drawings were adequate. So this is really just dealing with our component of it, right? The rules and regs for the planning board's portion of it. So I think if without having this in hand, Liz, I think if someone comes in to either your office or the building commissioner's office and is told, well, you have an addition or you have a detached, therefore you're going to need to do site plan review, then they're going to ask you, well, what is entailed with site plan review? But the first thing that they should find out is that that's the process that they have to go through, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think the building commissioner is doing that.
Okay. So do you think it's a hindrance to wait until the 15th of January to have the rules and regs adopted?
No, I think as long as people are comfortable with using this draft set. I mean, all the draft set does is capture what's in the bylaw.
Right.
So it's not like it's anything that's not already on the books. It's just walking people through the process. But it's all in the bylaw. And honestly, this has been really useful because I wasn't really thinking as much like from the design aspect piece. So I probably need to go back and read that bylaw more carefully. Because I was thinking it was much more site stuff. I wasn't thinking that the board was gonna be talking about, like aesthetics. Because that's getting into a whole other world. And knowing that this is it's not a protected use, but it is a protected use, sort of. Yeah, so it's probably, this is good. It's all good.
I think it's great giving people the regs, applicants the regs. I mean, use it as our beta version,
Mhm.
see what kind of feedback you get, and we just tweak it as we go. I mean, nothing's gonna be perfect out of the box.
Mhm.
And you're the person that's gonna hear it all, so. Put it out there and see what
Yeah, and I
happens.
understand the need for a much more simple 10 steps. This is what you need to do instead of giving them
The
this.
bylaw, right.
Yeah.
But I also hear Cheryl, where it's like 10 steps, one of those steps is gonna cost you
Yeah.
$4,000. It's like, okay, wait a minute. How can we get around that too?
Mhm. Yeah, this is gonna be expensive no matter what. I just don't see how anyone does this without spending some real money.
And I was pushing back on the survey at the last meeting, and now I really appreciate the value of it.
So we're agreeing, we'll have the draft for any applicants that come in, but we can revisit this on the 15th. Does that sound good? And then we'll also be able to hopefully take a vote on the site plan rules and regs also, which we may want to add some things in the meantime based on some good comments that Carolyn had. Okay, all right. So let's move on to the rules and regs for site plan approval. Some of the comments and suggestions that you had provided.
So I know not all of you have seen my email, so I'll just go through that. And the first comment relates to section 11.1.3. And this is about the clerk timestamping the original application. As we know from other types of zoning applications, everything starts with the town clerk, gets stamped, received by this town clerk, and the clock starts to tick. What's a little different here, however, is you go down to 11.15, and we're talking about the planning director is going to go through that application, determine whether or not it's complete, notify an applicant if it isn't complete, give them some period of time to cure that, and a copy of and if they don't cure it, a non-compliance letter is then sent to the office of the town clerk. So my question in all of that is, you don't want that original application stamped by the town clerk to be starting the clock for everything. And you also want to be careful that sometimes these notices of non-compliance, sometimes someone forgets that it has to go to the town clerk, or the town clerk forgets to put it in the right file for the right thing. So it might actually, I would make a recommendation that when the completed application is actually received, that also be sent to the town clerk. Because if someone on the other end of this 120 days, because I'm assuming we're not gonna have let's keep it simple and keep the special permit, combined special permit off to the side. If this is a straightforward 120 days, and if the only thing the town clerk has is the original application, well, a lot of things could happen after that original application. The planning director could go back and forth with an applicant for 2 months, waiting for revised plans that never come. And then, a less trustworthy applicant may try to come back later on and say, hey, I'm entitled to constructive approval because more than 120 days have now passed since the time I submitted my application. The town clerk's gonna go to her file, see, oh, you're right, and is gonna be ready to issue some kind of certificate of approval. So I think we wanna tighten up that process between, the original application and a completed application. Just to make sure that I would make sure that completed application, maybe that's a compliance form or somehow or other something that clearly identifies you now, Liz, have deemed this to be a completed application. That also has to be stamped, filed with the town clerk. And I would say that all of the timeframes then flow from that date stamp. You might also just decide, maybe the original application doesn't have to go to the town clerk, but we could talk a little bit more about it, but I think it's more important to make sure that revised completed application does go to the town clerk.
Well, just while on that note, so would we move the 1.5, just renumber it? So, because I was in that similar situation. I went to the town clerk with an application, and then I also went to the town planner, and it was a little bit confusing. So would it go to the town planner first? Because
This is intended to start with the clerk.
it is intended to start.
I mean, that's how I laid it out. So are you suggesting with the site plan review, you don't necessarily have to start with the clerk?
That's one option, or another option is really just to make it clear in 11.1.5 that, you're notifying the town clerk with this non-compliance letter if someone doesn't provide a completed application. What I'm suggesting is you also want to make sure the town clerk gets the completed application and gets that time stamped in. And I would further add the timestamp on the completed application then starts the clock for the time to act.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Everything that you laid out here, all of it.
I would have thought it
make
would
all
always
those
start
changes.
with the town planner, the application in the past.
Tim
My
liked it.
experience,
When Tim was here, Tim liked it to start with him, but I don't think it's a requirement.
It varies a lot from town to towns. I know a lot of towns like it to go to the department first because, and I mean absolutely nothing disparaging against any town clerk.
No.
But you go into the town clerk's office with your application,
Right.
they're gonna stamp it, say, thank you very much, have a nice day. Whether you've included 5 out of the 20 requirements or 20 out of the 20 requirements, that is neither here nor there to them. They're just
Right.
gonna stamp it in.
right,
Versus you might want, in this circumstance, have them file first with the planning director. You then have your preliminary review, you deem it complete, and once it's deemed complete, that has to go to the town clerk's office to be
That's why we
stamped.
put a pre-approval process in our bylaw.
yeah, I mean,
To-
that kind of sort of spells that out, that.
It ensures that it
To talk about having a pre-application
comes to you
sketch and
first.
then talk about identifying applicable information requirements, et cetera. I mean, I'd be happy to have them to have them, you know, to walk them downstairs. Like as far as,
But that should go into the rules and
I
regs,
just-
something specifying that.
yeah, I guess I'm trying to, beyond sort of like that pre-application process, like I think that's supposed to kind of.
And I don't disagree that a lot of that
flush
could be
out.
flushed out, but if I remember correctly, the pre-application process is encouraged, but
Yeah.
not required. So what if someone
Right.
skips that?
Right.
And
you
just,
know-
and just wants to go ahead and just file. And
You know,
then,
it would
and
be
then-
in their
and then-
best interest to meet with you first, you
Yeah,
know, but
yeah. Okay, all right.
And especially if they have an attorney who's not familiar or hasn't worked in Milton,
Mm-hmm.
I think naturally attorneys just go to
they go to the clerk
they go to
because
the clerk.
everything under chapter 40A is go to the clerk.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I think we could tweak this a little bit to just tighten it up to make sure that that completed application then goes to the clerk. And that starts the time frame for having to schedule the hearing and for the
okay.
board to have to act, all of that.
Okay, but somebody could
And I'm
insist on
happy
having
to
it
tweak
stamped
some
in
of
though.
this. It was just.
Someone insist on having it stamped in though,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So, okay, all right, so, all right.
Or you might get the applicant who says, my attorney said go to the town clerk and have this stamped in.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, all right. But I hear what you're saying. I agree. I agree that it needs to be, we don't wanna send stuff to the clerk that's gonna just cause us headaches, you know, down further in the process. So I totally agree with that. And as long as the clock starts ticking then, so there's not gonna be this expectation that, hey, I've already spent 3 weeks with the planning department, like, what are we doing here?
Right.
And so it's clear that the clock starts ticking after the 3 weeks or the 4 weeks or the
Right.
the meetings and the phone calls and what have you. So we can sort of spell that out here better? Okay, good, all right, that'll help me.
Yep.
Okay,
You should also spell out some kind of a by appointment for Liz, so people aren't just walking up to your office with a stack of papers and demanding you address them right now, just to respect your time. Would that be an issue for you? It would be an issue for me.
I mean,
You're at your
well,
desk or at your phone, someone walks in with their site and like, gotta look at this.
my experience has been that typically there's folks are reaching out in advance because they wanna have a conversation to try to figure out what they're supposed to do. And that's my experience. And you know, we're pretty clear on our communications that, you know, we're out of the office a lot on site visits and at meetings, so, you know, it's best to make an appointment with us.
We did update our names on the website, so.
And even more calls.
Yeah, that's good. So it no longer says the prior town assistant town administrator.
You are now no longer anonymous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have
I'm gonna
business
regret
cards, yikes. So I think that's probably okay. I mean, I haven't, you know, but yeah, could there be somebody who's, you know, who's aggressive and is like, hey, these are my rights and I want this stamped in and I want to get this thing reviewed and whatever, yeah, so that can happen too, but I definitely wanna suss out as much as we can before it gets stamped in downstairs. I totally agree with you on that.
Right. My next comment was really more just a comment more than anything. That once you've got a completed application, you have to open the hearing within at least 30 days later, but no more than 45 days later. You know, that could, if you push it out to the 45 days, that could leave you with just 75 days to review an application. That's not very many meetings when you stop and you think about it. So I also recognize that no one wants to go ahead and pay the cost or prepare the legal ad in anticipation of a completed application and a hearing date. I fully appreciate that. The only thing I would suggest thinking about, since you're also allowed to use outside consultants that you might need for any sort of technical expertise, you don't want to wait, and I don't know what your practice is, so please, educate me if I need to be, but I would think that the better use of that time would be if the planning director is gonna get the first look at this application and make sure it is a completed application, she's gonna be in the best position to say, they're gonna need a traffic engineer, we're gonna need someone to look at stormwater, we might need a photometric plan, whatever it is that you might feel that you need. Maybe we need a landscape architect to look at some of the what's being proposed. You don't wanna wait until you're opening your public hearing on, let's say, day 45 of your 120 days to have a planning board start saying, well, what areas of discipline do you think that we need to hire an outside consultant? Okay, Liz, do you think you could get some, solicit some quotes for us and find out? Okay, we come back 2 weeks later at our next meeting, or maybe 4 weeks later at the next meeting, by the time you've got proposals. That's not gonna be enough time for a lot of these folks to conduct a meaningful review of the project. So if it isn't your practice, I would suggest that for this, I would delegate that peer review, identification of disciplines, and ability to at least solicit quotes to the planning department right from when you get an application in. Even if you get a quote from someone and you don't even have a completed application yet, you're not spending a dime. But you're giving them a sense of what is the project, where is it located, what would it cost you to provide some kind of peer review of this for us. I don't think their cost estimate's gonna change much from original application to completed application, but I want you to maximize the use of time. I know the applicant can grant extensions. Again, sometimes we have applicants that are perfectly willing to grant extensions. Sometimes you've got the applicant who says, you've already had enough time with this and I'm not giving you any more. So just something to think about as you move forward with this. Constructive approval, Liz, you were talking about this, and I think that really kind of goes hand in hand with the whole issue of the completed application being filed with the town clerk and that sort of thing. But what we don't say is, now the bylaw just announces that failure to act within 120 days shall be deemed constructive approval. I think we should actually put something in the regulations as to how does one go about asserting constructive approval? If we use other examples of, say, under Chapter 40A, if someone thinks that the zoning board didn't act on a variance within 100 days, there's a process for them to provide a notice to the town clerk, to provide a notice to the parties in interest. Those parties in interest can literally initiate a lawsuit to challenge whether constructive approval has occurred. I'm not suggesting we want someone to initiate a lawsuit, but I would think that at a minimum, they've got to provide some kind of notice to the town clerk. I would think we'd want the town clerk just to check in with you, the planning director, to make sure that there haven't been any extensions granted. No one's trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. I had a situation in another community where we're at a meeting one night, verbally, the applicant agrees to a further extension of time. Everybody walks out of there with the understanding that we're gonna get more time. The staff person did not have handy the extension agreements, the pre-printed extension agreements were not handy. So the staff member said, I'll follow up with them the next day. The follow-up didn't happen. The next meeting comes, we have a snowstorm, the meeting gets canceled. We go to the next meeting date, and in the interim, what does the applicant do? The applicant files for constructive approval. And the board's all up in arms saying, but we had an agreement to extend. So you had a verbal agreement. It never got put in writing. It never got recorded with the town clerk's office. So the town clerk's presented with this request. Town clerk had no option but to find constructive approval. So I don't, I think at least something that requires that they go to the town clerk's office to get a certificate of constructive approval, and that the town clerk have to confer with the planning department to make, just to confirm the timelines and confirms no outstanding extensions, that type of thing, before it gets issued, would just be my suggestion for this. And I think we talked about the Dover Amendment. I think that really covers most of my comments, and, you know, I said, I'd be happy to tweak the regulations a little bit, provide some language. I don't mean to just, I don't mean to sit here and spout off some ideas and then say,
No,
no,
I'd be
figure it out. You know,
Two of you to.
I'm
yeah.
happy to redline and help with that.
That'd be great.
Because it may very well be that as I notice one thing, maybe something else has to be tweaked just a little bit to be consistent. And then you all do with it what you will.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
These are your regulations.
Yeah, no, this is great. I'm trying to marry the narrowness of like what we can and can't do, and then with kind of how they already do things here in town. You know, so it's a little bit of a little bit of art.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
You know, so no, that's awesome. That'd be really helpful.
And I can't help on the art part, so feel free to say, that is not how we do this in Milton. Okay. You know?
I don't know yet. I don't
There's
know.
probably some better ways to do things in Milton.
That could be said. Absolutely. That is not unique.
So if you see anything that could
communication.
be done
Happy to
better,
do that,
or
yep.
if we've omitted something which you think is important and has worked well in other towns.
I can certainly do that and make sure that you've got that well before January 15th.
Yeah, and I'm probably gonna send you the section of rules which apply to project review fees.
Section 12.
Yeah.
So we can button that up too,
Yeah.
sure, yes.
Is it, maybe we could add that language there about me having the authority to, you know, because honestly, like a one of these, I'm gonna ask for $5,000, like when they apply for engineering review. I mean, that's just a bare minimum number. That's my plan. So if we can somehow have that in that section.
Yep.
And then they can have it back if we don't use it, but that's how I'd like to do it.
Do you have certain peer reviewers? I know some towns will have like a firm that is, you know, just waiting for you to call and say, got a new project in, here you go. Do you routinely use someone for various things?
Civil engineers, we have a few, there's a few that,
Okay,
yeah, we have some names that
okay.
you, I don't know if we can.
I know Tetra, I've seen
Tetra Tech,
Tetra Tech, I've seen that name for traffic, or Beta maybe. There are a couple of firms that have come up in a couple of
Okay.
projects I've looked at so far. I was planning on getting scopes from them for you know, sort of general.
Like on-call engineering
Yeah,
services,
exactly.
whatever. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question about that. So say there are applicants and they have certain traffic consultants and engineers, and those consultants work with an applicant. Is it then appropriate for the town to hire those consultants to
Same
review
firm.
another project? I mean, is it okay to be on both sides of the table?
Some people feel yes, it is. Some people think, I don't know that I like that. You know, when we're talking about peer review consultants under chapter 4453G, the applicant's paying for it, but it is your consultant. You hire that person. The applicant can only object to our selection if they think you've hired a firm that doesn't have a traffic engineer and you're expecting them to do the traffic assessment. So, you know, they can challenge the qualifications. They can also challenge on the basis of a conflict. So, but it's not exactly clear, you know, what is a conflict? And as an attorney, I look at a conflict perhaps a little bit more conservatively than others might. So for example, there might be, let's just take Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech might work for, developer A in Canton. But then when developer A has a similar project here in Milton, maybe Tetra Tech is not their engineer, maybe they have hired, somebody else instead. So do we want to then hire Tetra Tech when we know that Tetra Tech has worked with developer A? Maybe we don't. And often what I find is that the firms you reach out to, they will say, just for the record, I have worked with this developer before. Or if they feel they truly have a conflict, they will say, I can't submit a proposal, I have a conflict. Or they might say something like, I am working currently with that developer, but in a town 25 miles from here. Do we really care? Like, is there really some kind of like inside baseball type of conversation going on? I don't have as much of an issue with an engineering firm or a traffic engineer representing developers and towns, provided there is some sort of difference of the type of the project and maybe even some distance between us and that other community they
But
work
if it was
in.
in the same, like in Milton, because I've noticed we have done that before.
Yeah.
Like a certain consultant represented a developer in Milton, and then Milton hired the developer, and I was watching, and I'm like, I don't think that makes sense to me.
It's probably, I don't think it is a direct conflict because it is, I'm gonna assume, if it's a different board,
Yeah.
different project, different scope of review, things like that. I mean, I could come up with probably, half a dozen reasons why it's okay. But I get the gut reaction of, ooh, I don't like that. That just seems to be a little too close for comfort. Because you think about things that might be said, for example. If an engineer who is working as a peer reviewer, suppose they come into the planning department, or even like as you saw with MAPC earlier tonight, here are preliminary findings, right? And we have a casual conversation, they get some feedback of, where the board seems to be at with this project. Well, an engineer could come in, could have a conversation and say, or, with any of you or with staff, and, maybe be led to believe that, well, if you shave 30 projects off of 30 units off of this, I think you'd get an approval from the board. Oh, okay. Well, then that engineer, 2 days later is then in the developer's office having a meeting with them about another project, across town, and says, oh, by the way, I think if you knock off 30 units, you got an approval. So there is like that sense that there isn't, you can't feel completely confident in your conversations with somebody who is representing both sides in the same community. Now, whether everyone just has their guard up about that, or whether that's just a basis to say, no, thank you. I just had a developer challenge the selection of a peer review consultant because the peer review consultant worked, the property straddles two property lines. The peer review consultant worked not for the town, but for abutters in that abutting town against this particular developer, but not on this project. But they didn't ever want to see that particular, consultant ever again. And, I said to the board, I'm like, I don't think it's a conflict, but I think it's going to be a distraction. The board is going to insist, they're going to appeal. They're going to insist that, this guy had some implicit bias against the developer. And so you want your decision to rise and fall on its merits and not have it be tainted by that kind of mess. So it can get a little close for comfort sometimes. So I don't disagree that, that might just be an internal policy that you just look, there are enough engineering firms out there, you can find somebody who isn't working with a developer in Milton at the same time.
Thank you. This has been really helpful, really wonderful, moving us forward on getting our rules and regs solidified and reviewing the comments from the AG's office, which is great. One thing it's not on our agenda, so I don't want to get into the discussion, but I'm thinking of our timeframe and the Springtown meeting, and one of the items that we had set as a priority was to look at our signage. It was something our previous town planner had seen a lot of flaws and issues that had come up, some holes that were vacant. So he had previously drafted a very comprehensive, detailed sign bylaw, which we ended up pulling back before our last town meeting because it's a huge section of definitions, which we may want to separate. It was very detailed, and some of the items were really were understood by the sign. We have a sign review committee in town, and a lot of the items are technical. So for somebody who would be working with a sign designer, it all made sense. To a lay person, it might be like, oh, I don't understand what that terminology, that lumens, certain lighting levels. And we just it will be familiar to town meeting because they've just gone through that with the lighting trespass bylaw that was recently passed, but a lot of it's technical. So we have a draft of that, but we also have what was passed most recently in 2017. So what I thought is, without taking up anyone's time right now, but I just wanted to get permission, would be to ask Carolyn to begin reviewing that.
Sure.
With the expectation that we would like to have a really good sign bylaw for the spring that would, we can have a conversation offline on what were some of the problems and things that have come up. Billboards, for example, would be one of them.
Just put it on the
neon
Braintree
lights.
border, it'll be
Yeah.
fine.
So really, and a lot of the work that we've done in we've been doing some overlay zoning in Milton Village, East Milton Square, where we've put some design guidelines into those, which we are hoping to sort of tie into what we would like to see our signs look like in town. Meeting, not internally lit signs, doing more, when appropriate, and what we can prohibit again, and what is reasonable that we would like to, work with a shop owner or a business owner. So if you could help us begin, and maybe again, you know of towns who have really good sign review.
I'm gonna tell you, most town sign bylaws really are not that good. They are usually either exactly what you described. Why do we have 15 pages talking about signs?
Yeah.
What's the difference between a monument sign and a ground sign and a,
Yep, a downlit, uplit, and the size of a sign, and so, as a historic town, we want to keep the character, but we also want to, work with our businesses as well. So
People want to be able to
business-friendly.
find they want to be able to find their restaurants and salons, exactly, right?
Right, exactly. So that would be great to take a pass at that, and you can see where we are in both. Yeah.
Could I get a copy of that
Yes.
prior draft? I mean,
I was
are
gonna
you
say-
happy with that prior draft and just want it to kind of be
I think it could be
simplified somehow?
Exactly, I
Okay,
think
don't
so.
reinvent the wheel, but work with that draft?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's
Or
longer
things-
than 15 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was too long.
Not too much, but we tried to cover everything.
And a
we
lot of
kinda
it was
covered
a
everything
lot
in
of it was
this.
definitions, which are maybe could go into a different section, which wouldn't be so cumbersome.
Okay.
So,
And let me ask, as far as do you have a schedule out yet for having to submit warrant articles?
we do. I don't have it in front of us right now, but we could get that to you as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, because there's a few things that we would like to be thinking about, but some things we'll be working on, but we recognize they won't be ready for a Springtown meeting.
Okay.
Does that sound good to everyone? If I just at least give to get ahead of things.
Sure.
And I know we're in the holidays now, so I don't expect any, feedback until.
Nothing says, Christmas Eve like a good signed bylaw,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. It's amazing just because we've been so tied to all of these different schedules with deadlines, how quickly they come, because the warrant committee needs time to review and the select board, and we want to make sure that they're ready sooner than later so people can have in public hearings, people
Right,
could give
right.
comments, so.
Nope, that's fine. That's why if you could just let me know, so I make sure
Get those,
that
I can,
make,
Absolutely.
you get what you need before
yeah.
a deadline.
We can send those to you. Perfect. Thank you. So anything anyone else has? Liz, anything?
Nope.
Well,
That's a lot. That's a lot.
thank you.
Yes, we
did.
did.
Well, welcome, and we're grateful
Very
to have
appreciated.
your-
Well, thank you. It's, I'm looking forward to
Counsel.
working with all
Yeah.
of you guys. Thank you.
Good.
And I probably will not see you, so happy holidays.
Happy holidays to
Same
you.
to you.
That signed bylaw in January.
I know, thank you.
Have a good rest of the meeting.
too.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's warmed up to about 50 degrees out there.
Yeah. The winds, it was the winds.
Oh my
today.
gosh, I
It was
know.
Just.
Something about this building, you end up parking farther away from the entrance.
Yes.
I know,
In the side door,
right, it's so very
you
true,
don't
but
notice it until you're in a night like tonight.
I enjoy being in this new built space, so.
No, I don't know. This
is
sounds
a
like
great
maybe people
space.
want the basement
base-
better. You guys might be basement dwellers. I don't know.
Oh, no.
What was the throwing me?
Yeah. Good night, thank you.
Thank
you. That's. So that was great, yeah, she's gonna be fantastic, yeah, great, yeah. KP is gonna be great. So we had just talked about having each of our committees just give an update, and I gave an update on open space last time, and so just thought you could just highlight what's happening with the capital improvement committee at this point, if there's,
Yeah, I love being on Capitol, it's great.
but thank you for serving
And I
on.
don't wanna be Mr. Negative, but it's grim. We approve anything over 25 grand that lasts 5 years or longer. Fire trucks, street sweepers, windows at the school, windows at the town hall. And most of all of the department heads will give us a 5-year outlook of what they want. And if you add up everything that they want over the next 5 years, I think it's $220 million. And we allocate about $1 million a year. So, what do you do? So what we're doing is listening to all the department heads, like DPW came in this on Zoom, came to our meeting this morning. Facilities came last week. And we just asked them for their top 3. What are your 3 most urgent things? And we try to split up $1 million accordingly. Last year was a little more exciting in that we had the 4th floor of Cunningham classroom build out, which I really pushed for as a planning guy, because we have an overcrowding problem, and we have 500 more units coming online soon, and we're gonna need classroom space. So that I thought was sort of, granted, we blew the budget, but I think it was low hanging fruit, and it was definitely a good use of the money. This year, it's not as, satisfying, but to the department heads, they need this money and they need these things, whether it's a fire truck or a street sweeper placed, and we're gonna give away the money as the best we can. So we haven't made any decisions yet as to where the money's gonna go, but hopefully we're gonna meet 2 more times, and by January, we'll be able to make recommendations to the warrant.
Now, do you guys tend to give out fewer projects but larger sums, or do you do more projects at a lower dollar amount for each project?
I think it's 50-50. I mean, we're just putting out fires.
Yeah.
Whatever the urgent need is. And whether it's, something came up about flushing the boiler at Cunningham Collycott. It's got glycol in it, it clogs the system. You gotta flush it, we haven't flushed it in a while. And it led to a freeze up. So we're like, all right, we have to do this.
Wouldn't that be in an operating budget for
I thought it
for
would.
maintenance for because I think that's where some people have said, oh, we had to build all new schools because we had let, things just weren't maintained or weren't kept up. And now we have consolidated facilities. Does consolidated facilities submit a budget request for saying, this is what maintenance is gonna cost, and we're gonna have to flush this boiler every
5
few years?
What triggered it was it's over
Because it seems like that should be
$25,000.
built into more of an operating than a capital.
It should be, but what triggered it was over 25,000. Now, whether it stays with us or not, there was another thing, it was a hot water heater at one of the schools. That was 85 grand to replace.
Wow.
So I don't know if that, I mean, I kind of agree it should be.
Because Bill Ritchie did a great job, I thought. I mean, he always did a wonderful job, but it seems like maybe some things that we know should be presented in the annual budgets, you know, when we're looking at everything.
I can go back and ask, because we're gonna meet again on Thursday.
So the difference in operating versus capital.
But I know because it was over 25,000, it brought it to our attention. Whether it stays with us or not, I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Any
Cheryl has
questions?
her hand up.
Oh, Cheryl, sorry.
Yeah, Jim, do you review items that get bonded, so larger expenditures that would go out for bonding?
Yeah, most of our stuff is bonded versus free cash.
So just $1 million though, each year, because don't things come on and off the bond? I don't know, whatever it's called, but I thought those were fairly large, some of them.
Like the new fire stations.
The new fire stations,
Those would be bonded, but I don't know if those would
That's
be.
not
comes to
capital bonded.
capital. So I know we talked about the park down at the wharf, if that was gonna come to us, and where are my notes here? Hold on a second. We spoke to that. And I kind of felt that that wasn't really a capital project, that should come from CPC. But I don't know, I would imagine that would be bonded. But I guess I can say I don't know.
Has
find out.
has the
I can
CPC bonded
why-
things? Has the CPC bonded anything yet?
Well, is the board's representative to the CPC? No, not yet. But there is some ongoing discussion about doing that. I think it's been about $1 million also for CPC funds, you know, to disperse across historic preservation, recreation, open space, and affordable housing. But I was thinking, like the debt service that the town has, you know, obviously it has things like the fire stations, but it also has other things that I don't think have to go to town meeting for debt override exclusion or to the town voters overall. So I'm just curious, Jim, maybe you could kind of find out what the process is for some of those if you don't have them on a regular basis, because it seems to me like $1 million could be like one department's request, and I can see why you have $220 million worth if you only are able to distribute $1 million a year. They're just going to keep aggregating, right? So I'm just curious what happens with those requests eventually. Like at a certain point, you know, if there's a capital request for a roof replacement and you don't replace it, you're going to have some problems. I'm just wondering how many things like that there are.
I think there's a ton. And I think unfortunately it gets rolled into next year. And I think at some point it triggers an override. But we just had an override. So I think the goal is to avoid another override. But you know, I can find out more. That's the way I understand it, is if capital doesn't get funded, it gets pushed to the next year, and hopefully next year it gets funded. I mean, Richard Wells keeps bringing up, you know, John Folcarelli from the library waited, I think, 8 years to get a generator at the library. He finally got it, but you just keep pushing it to the next year and pushing it to the next year. Now, if they don't have a generator, it's not a catastrophic fail, but if, you know, we let glycol build up in a boiler and it freezes, that's a catastrophic fail.
Yeah.
That leads to more.
Yeah, so see, I feel like that generator is sort of an extra where a roof or a boiler should not be a capital expenditure. To Meredith's point, that is a maintenance and should be an operating.
Yeah, and I don't know how to push it over to that because there's also recaulking of the windows. That should be a maintenance item.
That should be
That's
maintenance.
relatively simple.
Yeah.
But, it comes before us, and I guess I don't know why. So I could find out the difference between maintenance and.
Yeah. 'Cause we don't, yeah,
So I always thought capital were the extras.
that's, yeah.
The extras that, like Chromebooks for the
Books are in
for
there,
the school department, like
fire
those are-
truck replacement,
Yeah,
big stuff.
yeah.
Even Chromebooks are 319,000. That's 20% of them, so every year, 20% of them,
And then a new fire truck, isn't that like 750,000?
1.1.
And EV vehicles for town staff for the, inspection department, they use town vehicles. I think they are,
They all need one.
they all,
Over the next 5 years.
yeah,
Electrical
that's-
inspector, plumbing inspector, building inspector, they
Yeah.
all. The Board of Health wants one,
Yeah.
COA wants a new van, but hopefully that'll be a grant. It's a ridiculous amount of money that we need.
Well, I know my committee's not on this, but at the budget overview committee, it says we have $4.2 million in
Free cash,
free cash, so that's a discussion.
is a question. I don't get to answer it, ask it today. That was my, are we financing that free cash with our override last year, right? 0.5 mil, but 4 million in free cash.
and those
I don't
are
know.
expenditures by the select board approves from the free cash. Yeah, so, yeah, because we're looking at some of the planning, expenditures that we might need to make and are important enough to use free cash, the recodification, hiring, doing some important work that may need to borrow from free cash, if it's a town-wide, initiative that's worthy, so.
And how long does
Good,
the free cash
thank you.
last? Does it last a year? Does it last 3 years? Does it last 5 years?
I think the goal is to last 4 years, and then every 4 years have an override.
I replenish the free cash.
With Prop 2.5, it's almost impossible. Good, all right, thank you so much, I appreciate that. And so the next thing, and I really just wanted to take the opportunity to thank this entire board, every member, our staff, for all the work that has been done in the last couple of years. I mean, I think it's, somebody had asked, well, what does the planning board do? Does it really the planning board other than MBTA, what have they been doing? This was putting together a chart which everyone can review and look at, which is the last 3 years, because I think a lot of residents in the town don't realize how much the planning board has been doing. So beyond MBTA, beyond ADU, beyond site plan approval, beyond overlay zoning in the Milton Village, design guidelines, overlay zoning in East Milton Square, we have been highly productive. And I just want to thank everybody for the number of meetings that we have had to get through. And we have, I think we have a good set of goals that are ahead of us. We don't have to go into huge detail, but I just want to acknowledge Maggie actually put together a chart because somebody had questioned you and said, well, what has the planning board been doing? And I keep a list. We have our annual reports, but I've been keeping a list of all the things that we've been doing. So I gave you my list and, all the A&Rs we've approved, all of the, the preschools, the memory care facility. I mean, it's really, there've been some massive projects that I think we've worked really well together on doing and with our applicants. We're seeing a lot of construction. I think a lot of people don't realize how much development is in the pipeline right now. They're starting, they're seeing 440 Granite going up. They've just, the Hendry site has been completed recently. The Now we're seeing 40B projects around town. So I think people are seeing how much has been going on, and really keeping that in mind when people are like, well, we need more development, we need, more tax base, that they understand how much development and what the capacity of the town staff is, from the planning department, from the building department, really what is required to manage and oversee all of these projects, So when we look at things and we look at how much more development or, how we want to have control over our projects, it really is a balance of, how we grow the town, but in a responsible way. And so Maggie, I know you put a chart together, which what we would like to do is put something, and I think Liz, you said that we could do this, is have it on our website, have it available, because we do list project developments, approved projects, there's categories, but to have a spreadsheet like this, I think might be helpful. And it will keep, and we can keep a running, sort of a running inventory of the projects that are pending or approved or completed. And maybe we even have a category there. And I don't know if people have had a chance to take a look at that, and if there's anything that's missing that has not been included in just the last, I know you updated, and I didn't get to see the updates, Maggie. So if you just want to highlight some of the things that you were working on with that.
Well, I have, I have only been on the board since 2022. And I know a lot of the time has been on MBTA, and so I was sort of, I kind of got a little annoyed with a couple town meeting members after the past town meeting, said, oh, the planning board, doesn't, what have they done? What have they done? So it prompted me to go through, be like, we're busy. And, if you ask our families would say, we're busy. So I took a little bit of offense to when when two people said, the planning board doesn't do anything. So I went through back to 2022 when we started, and I don't know if this is the proper way to do a spreadsheet. Maybe the information can be a little bit different, so I don't, it can be changed however anybody wants to change it. But I think we've accomplished a lot, and I feel like we get a large audience on hot button topics, and that's why, people tune in. But on every day, I don't know how many people are tuned in tonight. And one.
Well, not necessarily the live stream though.
Yeah, they could be watching and they watch it on repeat. But I think normally we don't actually get a super large viewing audience all the time, or they tune in and tune out, and so they don't really know what has happened. And to Meredith's point, a lot of people have said, oh, I just didn't know. I didn't know that Randolph Ave 40B project is so big. And it's interesting because that's the project that's been talked about for the past 15 years. So I don't know why people didn't really know it, because it's been around for that long. So I just want to, again, echo Meredith's comments. I enjoy being on the board and I enjoy working with all of you, and we always have different perspective on things. But I think everybody really works hard. And I just want the townspeople to know that we work hard. And fortunately, I work with the public, and I hear praise for the board and say thank you for all that you did. So I just wanted to kind of pass it along. If you guys are not, you don't see as many town residents perhaps, but a lot of people are
And I
thankful.
hear that a lot as well.
Yeah.
People really do appreciate.
They do appreciate all the effort, and everyone, from what I hear, is they say every board member works hard. So I just was trying to, quantify and put it in writing. I'm a visual person, and I like to see things, and we should take a compliment. We should be proud of our accomplishments, and recognize all that we do. So that's why I did that. So thank you.
I think it's great. And then you look at top of the list, second page, 111 Highland Street. Granted, we got it passed, approved, whatever. It took almost a year. I mean, how much time is associated with each one of these line items?
So you're 100%.
So many hours. This represents so many hours times 5 people plus a planning director plus an assistant planning director. I mean, the amount of hours that go into this job is out of control.
Yeah, so that's one column that I was sort of contemplating was, should I put
Number of
how?
meetings, number of hours.
Yeah, how long it took, how many months of meetings, and I didn't have the time
That's all right.
really to do
That
all
would
that.
take more time out of your day.
Yeah, so, but I think I did think about that.
But it's good, community outreach, all of the different public forums that we've held, really trying to educate for those who say, we didn't know about MBTA zoning, like, when did this happen? We've tried to really put things out there and be as transparent and communicate as often as possible. So maybe, the staff could think about a good way to put that on the website. Maybe you might want to reformat it or do something else with it. I'm not looking at you, Avanti, but you are very technically savvy, and so we would love your ideas. So.
And like Cheryl's been on it longer than all of us, so I think, to recognize Cheryl's,
Absolutely.
Input, feel free to add all the stuff that you've done, Cheryl,
Yeah.
Cheryl's been on it longer than I have, so,
And so Maggie, I was looking for something the other day and I found myself on the archive section of the website. And it had zoning articles that we worked on in 2015. And there were like 10 at least. And I was looking at them and thinking, well, some of these were probably sent back for further study and they haven't been studied since in 10 years. But, there are things on the website and I'm not sure how I found it, but maybe it would be something to make it a little easier to find, like initiatives or archive materials from different years. So if people are interested in one of those topics, they could ask the board, to pick it back up, to put a priority on it. But one of the projects that, speaking of things that take time, the zoning, so the memory care, we talked about the permitting of it. There was zoning for that. There was zoning for Winter Valley. There was zoning for the Great Estates, which allowed for the Wolcott Woods permitting. There was the overlay zoning in Milton Village. Some zoning that we should revisit for the corner of Brook and the Parkway there, where the old, the building is probably condemned by now, the building
Knights of
is falling
Columbus.
apart. Yeah. So, one of the things I think that we've talked about before that's been looked at that probably wants to be looked at again is like pre-existing non-conforming, like the businesses, great estates, whether condo conversion only applies to 10-acre properties now. So there's a lot of things that I'm sure that a lot of people don't even realize that some of the challenges or the issues that might want to be addressed. Scenic roads, we talked about scenic roads and whether we should update that. So there's lots of history in my 10 years, with different members who've had different interests. And there's a lot of good material that we should probably take a look at again.
Good. Well, thank you. So I think with that concludes everything on our agenda. Unless there's anything else from anyone. This was a great meeting and thank you all. And I wish everyone.
Meredith?
Yes.
I'm sorry, before, I'll just make a request for an agenda topic. The master plan committee, the 3 members at the planning board will need to appoint. I don't know if you've had conversations with Liz Dillon or Ben Zoll, how the 3 appointing bodies are going to do that. to make sure that there's the kind of skill sets, but that's just something I think that could be discussed. And then also, the board role in thinking about the targeted updates to the master plan.
Yep, I think that those are good. I think so far, I think there's been 2 applications so far for the master plan committee. But yeah, I think process-wise, we can discuss that, how this board, I think each board will probably have their own process on how they wanna do it. But yeah, I think that would be great to talk about that.
Yeah, it's a question of, making sure you get the cross-section of
Right,
where members live and their skill sets, that's all.
yep, exactly. All right, well, thank you all, and I just wish everyone a happy holidays and hopefully some good time with your families and to relax and enjoy. All right, so with that, a motion to adjourn,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second,
And I'll second.
roll call, all in favor, or roll call. Maggie?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes,
And myself, yes. Good evening.
good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.